The Hogwarts professor mixed into Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 501, The Bet Between the Two Voldemorts. Death Eater's Base, Seaside Cliff. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sea breeze blows, and the blue ocean is covered with layers of waves, which constantly hit the steep cliffs and stir up waves. Seagulls circle around the ocean, and their long cries spread throughout the nearby sea. But surprisingly, these seagulls have been circling over the ocean, and they seem to be afraid to touch the cliff. When you look at the cliff, you can clearly see dense black dots appearing. When you look closer, you will find a black gate standing on the edge of the cliff. In front of the gate, two Dark Lords are waiting quietly with Death Eaters. The atmosphere seems a bit solemn, but it also reveals urgency and expectation. In particular, some Death Eaters' faces show excitement and fanaticism. For pure-blood families, the purpose of this trip may be to recover losses and make a small profit. But for these Death Eaters, it is really a business with no capital, and the opportunity to get rich is right in front of them. How can they give up? The young version of the Dark Lord Tom and the pale version of the Dark Lord Voldemort stood side by side. Voldemort looked at the portal in front of him with suspicion, claiming to be able to pass through any space barrier. Although his other self boasted a lot, Gringotts has existed for hundreds of years and is known as the safest place in the world. It is impossible that there is no means of prevention, and space is the top priority. Not to mention the anti-thief waterfall, guard goblins, magic traps, etc. Layer by layer of protection. Only then can such a statement be made now. Voldemort, what do you think of the previous suggestion? Feeling Voldemort's skeptical attitude, Tom remained calm and talked about other topics instead. The grand event of the wizarding world is just around the corner. In this state, it must be better to join forces than to separate. Not to mention, we are going to a new country, everything is unfamiliar, and a killing is inevitable. Unity is the best choice. After hearing this, Voldemort remained silent and did not respond, as if thinking. At this moment, suddenly, buzz, the black door opened, and a faint light was emitted. In the middle, light green ripples appeared on the water surface, and the ripples kept shaking, as if they were looking for some kind of connection, or connecting to an unknown place. The ripples spread outward like ripples on the water surface, searching for location, establishing connection, energy transmission, channel establishment. In just 10 seconds, a series of complex processes have been completed. In the eyes of many Death Eaters, the opposite side of the black door is a huge space, and a familiar figure stands in the front. She raised her wand high and kept chanting. That was the Dark Lord's most loyal subordinate, Bellatrix Lestrange. Step, step, step. Voldemort walked to the door with his slow steps, looked up and looked for a few times, and his calm expression concealed his inner surprise. He took a step in, and the next moment, the whole person appeared in the vault of Gringotts. Tom followed. After seeing the two Dark Lords take action, the Death Eaters behind couldn't wait to rush forward. Bella, you did a great job. Voldemort patted Bella's shoulder gently and praised. Now, it's time to enjoy the results. What did you lose before? This time, take it back twice as much. Let's use killing to awaken the wizarding world's fear of Death Eaters. Hearing Voldemort's familiar, gentle, yet cruel tone, Bella trembled with excitement, and her whole body could not hide her excitement. Tom, who was standing by, couldn't help but curl his lips after seeing this, and didn't say much. This woman's brain has been eroded by black magic, and she is a little abnormal. He is not interested in recruiting such a subordinate. It's too easy to cause trouble, and it will only become more and more troublesome later. Voldemort didn't care about Tom's expression and glanced indifferently at Russo, the goblin controlled by the Imperious Curse. The next moment, Avada Kedavra, puff, the pale green Kedavra appeared, and a corpse fell in front of the door of the vault. It was the guard goblin outside who had just sensed the abnormal energy fluctuations, so he came to investigate. Unfortunately, he found a dead end. Voldemort stepped over the goblin corpse and walked out calmly. Avada Kedavra, Avada Kedavra. Several killing curses appeared one after another, and the life breath outside the vault decreased one after another. After Tom sensed it, he ignored it. Instead, he stood in front of the goblin Russo. The wand in his hand was against the temple at his waist. He pulled out the memories deep in the other party's mind one by one. Feeling the large amount of information emerging in his mind, Tom felt a little sorry. Alas, the real good things have been looted by Kamar-Taj. Even the dragon head was not spared. With a flash of thought, Tom slightly swiped the wand in his hand, and the light silver edge appeared on the goblin's neck. Crack. The cold air was chilly, and the body was separated. Only a few drops of cold blood dripped on the ground, but there was no bloody smell. Since the information was obtained, the goblin was of no use. For this kind of rebellious race, Tom only had disgust from the bottom of his heart. The Death Eaters behind him shuddered after seeing this. Next, the purebloods will collect their own vaults first. The rest of the wizards, follow me, Tom ordered with an unquestionable tone. The Death Eaters nodded one after another. In this situation, it is absolutely right to listen to the master. If you dare not listen, you will not even have the chance to defect. Tom did not say much. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked out directly, or to be more precise, he walked towards another self. The Death Eaters behind him looked at each other and followed him out of the vault. Then they quickly split into two groups. The pureblood wizards with their own background quickly ran to their own vaults. They took out the keys they had prepared in advance and opened the door of their own vaults. The other part followed them all the way and walked to Voldemort. At this moment, Voldemort exuded a hearty feeling of killing. The corpses of goblins who came to support him were all around. For some reason, Tom was also very excited when he saw it. He also wanted to kill a lot, to relieve all the depression since his resurrection. Perhaps, no matter which version of Voldemort, he enjoys the pleasure of killing. At this moment, Voldemort seemed to sense Tom's inner desire. He tilted his head and showed a rather cruel smile. Didn't you ask me what I thought of your previous proposal? This time, as long as you can keep up with my killing speed, then, I will do as you say. After hearing this, Tom nodded without hesitation, and also showed a cruel smile on his face. Okay, I'll add another prize. If you beat me, I will give you a Horcrux. Chapter 502 Voldemort's Killing Field. Bus. Gringotts is in a major crisis. Warning, major crisis, major crisis. All goblins, urgent assembly, urgent assembly. Get to the nearby platform within 1 minute and rush to the battlefield. A harsh buzzing sound rang out from all over the underground caves of Gringotts, and a large number of goblins in red clothes quickly gathered on the platform. The goblins that had already gathered, sat on carts and drove quickly to a certain direction in the east. They held magic guns made of metal in their hands, with a large number of bullets on their waists, and ran towards an unknown battlefield with serious expressions. Whoosh, 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 bang, 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 boom. The wind whistled in his ears, but in the whistling wind, the goblin Rio could vaguely hear fierce gunshots and rumbling explosions. This made him subconsciously hold the weapon in his hand tightly. The cold texture of the gun in his hand and the tight, full bullets on his waist gave him a certain sense of security. Soon, accompanied by the whistling wind, the goblin Rio saw the battlefield. The originally tall platform was filled with grey smoke, reflecting a chilling breath of death. The dust in the air turned into black smoke under the power of magic and continued to spread around, accidentally touching the goblins who came over, and the sound of corrosion and the goblins' screams of pain sounded. The whole space was filled with fear of death, and a chaotic atmosphere surrounded the platform. It is more appropriate to call it a platform than a ruin. The large rocks above the cave kept falling under the agitated spell, but they broke into pieces before they got close, and some even turned into flying ashes. The bodies of fighting goblins in red clothes were everywhere. Blood flowed wantonly, arms, heads and other limbs were scattered everywhere, and the pungent smell of blood was as eye-catching as if it was placed under the nose. This is a battlefield of killing and death, and the goblins here are like stupid lambs. All the goblins were terrified and terrified after seeing this scene. Avada Kedavra, Hand of Death, Death Mist. Voldemort waved his wand, leisurely casting the Kedavra curse and various deadly black magics, and from time to time he controlled the death mist above, to corrode the goblins who came to support him. A wanton and carefree smile flowed from his face. He was enjoying the pungent smell of blood that made the goblins feel sweet, so familiar, so kind. Especially when he heard the screams of the goblins. His magic power was excited. Killing, death, and darkness were originally his favorites, and his wizard talent blessed all of this. Under the two-phase amplification, he is the king in the field of black magic. Dumbledore couldn't beat him before, and Grindelwald was the same. Tom, who was not far away, looked at Voldemort at this moment, and suddenly felt his blood boiling. The essence of the two people is the same, and they have the same love for darkness and killing. But he is more rational, and he is restraining himself. If you want the biggest and most delicious results, you must restrain your inner thoughts, wait for the right time, and then take it down in one fell swoop. Boom. Voldemort casually cast an explosive spell, directly blowing the goblin on the opposite side to pieces. Then, without reducing his strength, he flew towards the goblins behind him one after another. With a loud bang, the goblins' flesh and blood flew all over the sky, and the rocks behind them were also hit by the spell. The huge rock on the opposite wall exploded again, and revealed a golden color vault. The Death Eater not far away licked his mouth subconsciously. Just now, this was a game between the two masters. They dared not interfere in the battlefield of the two masters, so they took advantage of this time to rob the vault on the platform where they were. It can be said that they reaped a lot of rewards. After robbing the nearby vaults, they set their sights on the vaults on other platforms. Although other vaults are not as rich as the vaults of pure blood families, there are more of them. No matter how small a mosquito is, it is still meat. It is a business without capital. What else can you ask for? However, when they set their sights on the battlefield, where Voldemort was killing people wantonly, they were envious, obsessed, and in awe, but also fearful. This is the top power of wizards. Go, start your plundering and killing. Today, let the Gringotts goblins pay the price of their lives for what they did. Voldemort seemed to sense the greed and fear in his men's hearts, and a ferocious smile appeared on his pale face. He waved the wand in his hand, and controlled the fog of death to separate in all directions, leaving a killing passage for the Death Eaters behind him. He did not have too high requirements for loyalty, because fear was enough to make the other party obedient, and interests made the other party fight with all their strength. Therefore, his only requirement was to have strong strength, fight for him, kill for him, and finally become the cornerstone of his journey to the king. After seeing this, the Death Eaters looked at each other and showed each other a cruel smile. Although there were many goblins rushing in the passage, these were just the appetizers of their killing and plundering. Bang, 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 Avada Kedavra. Body explodes. The Death Eaters rushed to the passage, waving their wands and releasing black magic. The sound of fierce bullets and cruel spells rang out one after another. However, the bullets were blocked, destroyed, and swallowed by the black spells that had been prepared. The passage was occupied by the Death Eaters. They rushed out, leaving behind only the corpses of goblins. At this moment, Voldemort glanced at the killing Death Eaters, and then looked at Tom not far away, with some doubts in his eyes. The other party kept waving his wand and casting runes that exuded a dark aura, but he didn't kill any goblins. Is this heading for failure? Or thought flashed through his mind, and then he threw it behind him. Don't you know yourself? Killing will never be rejected, and will never admit defeat. The other party is obviously preparing for some magic. Thinking of this, Voldemort waved his wand again. The black fog began to roll, and rushed into the goblin corpses underground. Crack, crack. As the black death mist seemed to inject some kind of energy into the corpse, the broken corpses nearby began to heal, and a large number of evil-looking dark monsters began to stand up and sprint towards the goblins not far away. Corpses are made. Puff, puff, puff. Bullets hit their flesh, and blood splashed everywhere along with the broken flesh, but it still did not hinder their actions. The goblin in the front was hugged tightly by the dark monster, and then swallowed it in one gulp, and the whole body was integrated into its own flesh. Then it looked at the next goblin. This made many goblins feel serious discomfort and special fear. The scene they faced today was the most evil, darkest, most chaotic and most powerless scene they had ever seen in their lives. Facing a wanton killing by the top Dark Lord in the wizarding world. At this time, the other Dark Lord had not yet taken action. The purple wand was waved gracefully in Tom's hand, and the mysterious breath floated around with the runes. It continued to spread outward, passing through the battlefield, through the wall, and quickly spread to the entire Gringotts. Chapter 503 Voldemort's Surprise Harvest. Killing, Madness. The sight of many goblins was a faint blood color, and their hearts were angry and crazy. They had only one thought in their hearts: kill the invading enemies. This was the only fanatical thought in their minds. It made them forget the horror in front of them, and suppress the instinctive panic in their hearts. Sprint, sprint, run forward. Their eyes were only on the enemy, and their hands were mechanically loading and shooting. The magic bullets were like fire snakes, constantly spewing, but after entering the black fog, there was no sound. It seemed to have completely disappeared, or corroded clean. This obvious abnormality seemed to be unaware of the goblins. Their eyes were bloodshot, and their faces could not hide the desire to kill. At this time, the goblins were more like Death Eaters than Death Eaters, and more like Dark Wizards than Dark Wizards. Compared with some abnormal goblins, Voldemort had already discovered the abnormality. He seemed to have discovered something, and with a wave of his wand, the black fog at the edge turned into a breeze and spread far away. The breeze turned into his eyes, and he detected the entire Gringotts after fighting. Quarrels, curses, fights, blood, chaos. All the abnormalities in Gringotts were reflected in Voldemort's eyes. Then, Voldemort turned his head to look at another elf who was still waving his wand not far away. He fell into silence. Voldemort's dark red eyes flashed with a strange red light, and the world in front of him changed. As Tom waved his hand, runes flew quickly to the surroundings, and turned into transparent silk threads. When these transparent silk threads passed through the killing battlefield created by themselves, they flew away with obvious black and red gas. Looking at it, every goblin was wrapped with more or less silk threads. Therefore, the goblins on the battlefield kept rushing towards him like crazy, and were killed by him wantonly. Therefore, the whole Gringotts was full of quarrels, and some areas had already started civil wars and killing each other. As he killed more and more, the negative emotions he generated became more and more intense, and the whole Gringotts would become more and more chaotic. Using his own killing, in the form of a curse, he spread chaotic emotions like a virus, sweeping across the entire Gringotts. As expected of himself. He likes this style. It's not that he can't do it, but he didn't expect it. He didn't expect such an efficient way of killing. At this moment, Voldemort was a little silent, and even the killing in his hands was reduced a lot. Although the two people are both himself, they are essentially the same. But their personalities are very different, and there are also significant differences in the direction of thinking. Especially when he felt that this curse contained a lot of traces of meditation. He couldn't help but sigh deeply. It seems that he must adjust his next behavior. He must become more perfect and stronger. The shortcomings must be made up. The goblin Rio stepped into the battlefield. His mind was blood red, and the crazy desire to kill emerged in his mind. Then, from the chest, a cool feeling came straight into his mind. He regained his sanity again. Looking at his companions who were attacking crazily, Rio's eyes were filled with panic and fear. He paused and touched the iron plate on his chest tightly with his left hand. Goblin Revolutionary Army. Fortunately, he joined the Revolutionary Army, otherwise he would be a dead body now. Touching the identity badge of the Revolutionary Army in front of him, Rio was filled with gratitude. Fortunately, God will not kill me, Rio said with gratitude, and then carefully adjusted the direction. The other goblins who were full of killing desire did not notice Rio's abnormality, or it was difficult for them to notice it. At the same time, Rio also saw many goblins retreating to the edge of the battlefield like himself. Looking at the familiar identity badges in their hands, Rio's face couldn't help but flash a trace of intimacy. This is his companion. The Revolutionary Army really has good things. Although the concept of equality between goblins mentioned is a bit empty, the things are really good. At this moment, Tom saw the goblins that were out of his influence, glanced at them, and ignored them. This super large scale spell itself has the possibility of being cracked. Besides, it will not kill the goblins in its own camp. At this moment, Voldemort seemed to have noticed some abnormalities of the goblins. After seeing that Tom did not seem to move, There was something thoughtful in his eyes. It seemed that some speculations were seen from Tom's actions. It seemed that the other party chose Gringotts for a reason. However, no one said or did much. After all, the two sides were now in a cooperative relationship and had common enemies. At this moment, the goblins in front of him were almost killed. Knowing that he had lost the bet this time, Voldemort was a little tired of killing. He began to change his target. The Death Eaters plundered the vaults of other pureblood families and wizards, and his target was the goblins' treasure house. After all, goblins are known for alchemy, and their family has a lot of treasures. When they get to Europe, recruiting new people to join, without money and treasures, it will probably be very troublesome. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The black fog spread everywhere, and Voldemort's body turned into a ball of black fog and flew away. When he explored the entire Gringotts just now, he specially looked for a place where the magic fluctuations were most obvious. I believe that the things there will not disappoint him. Seeing Voldemort leave, Tom looked around the vault that was looted by the Death Eaters, and the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up, revealing a faint smile. This time, Gringotts is really dead in name only. His task was finally completed. Next, it's time to plan for himself. The underground passage is long and messy. Even goblins have to carry some tools in their hands to ensure that they are not going in the wrong direction. At this moment, in the slightly dim underground passage, a group of black fog flew forward. His goal seemed very clear. After several turns, the direction was still clear. From time to time, the black fog would pause slightly before passing some underground vault platforms, observing the empty vault above the platform, or the Death Eaters who were looting. Then continue to fly, encountering Death Eaters and goblins fighting fiercely on the way, and goblins killing each other. Interesting ones will pause for a while and appreciate them. Boring ones will ignore them directly and continue to fly towards the destination. Those who tried to attack him were swept by the black fog, leaving only a pile of bones. Soon, the flying speed of the black fog slowed down, as if it had reached its destination. Through a wide passage, a huge platform appeared, guarded by a large number of goblins. They looked indifferent, and a faint yellow protective shield appeared on the edge of the platform. It seemed to help them avoid the harassment of Tom's curse. The black fog incarnated by Voldemort paused slightly, as if he was looking at the scene below. Although many goblins found the abnormality and started shooting at him with guns. However, it was meaningless. Under the incarnation of the black fog, ordinary spells were basically immune, and these bullets were within its range, even if they were attached with magic. However, watching more and more goblins come out and take out various magical firearms to shoot, Voldemort's eyes lit up, and he was a little surprised. He seemed to have guessed it. He came to the most important treasure of the goblins, their armory. Chapter 504 Harry Potter in Crisis Again. Hogwarts, the school infirmary. Woo woo. Kill. Avada Kedavra. Kill. Plunder. Make the goblins pay the price. Harry Potter was lying on the bed, surrounded by McGonagall, Snape, Sirius and others. They frowned or looked heavy, especially when they saw Harry Potter lying on the bed. His face was twisted with pain, and his whole body was trembling. Their hearts couldn't help but tighten, and their eyes were filled with worry and pity. Madame Pomfrey, what happened to my Harry? Sirius stood in front of the bed, pacing back and forth. In the end, he couldn't help but ask Madame Pomfrey, who was checking Harry's condition. Harry is my godson. No matter what, he must not get into trouble. The three deans McGonagall, Flitwick and Sprout on the side all turned their eyes to Madame Pomfrey. They still showed worry and heaviness on their faces, as well as uneasiness, because they had seen the same and similar situations before. Harry woke up in the middle of the night, with the same fear and pain as now, lying on the bed, trembling all over. After that incident, they received shocking news. The Dark Lord was resurrected. Later, they witnessed the existence of two Voldemorts. Reappeared again. Does it indicate, just like the last time, the root cause is still the resonance of the soul? Madame Pomfrey said in a low voice with pity. This child is experiencing a dark and desperate nightmare again. And at this point, Madame Pomfrey hesitated and seemed not to dare to judge. Sirius, who was standing next to him, was a little anxious when he saw this. Madame Pomfrey, what's the matter? And what happened last time? What are you hiding from me? God has mercy on me. The last time Harry Potter had an accident, Sirius was still in Azkaban. Dumbledore was there at the time, and the matter was finally resolved perfectly. In addition, it involves Voldemort, so this matter is naturally kept secret. Madame Pomfrey knew the reason, so she hesitated and slowly said, "This time the situation is more serious than last time. Harry's soul seems to be polluted in some way, and it seems to be related to dark magic such as darkness, despair, killing, and even mixed with curses, resentment and other factors, which is more complicated and more difficult to deal with. Last time, Dumbledore was there, and these intrusions were effectively isolated. But now Madame Pomfrey didn't say anything else, but everyone present understood. This time Dumbledore was gone. He went to the distant United States to fight the first generation of Dark Lord Grindelwald. So what should we do now?" Sirius' tone seemed to be filled with despair. Then, he set his eyes on McGonagall, Flitwick and Sprout, and his tone was cautious, as if he regarded them as the only ray of hope, and asked, "Is there any magic that can help Harry now? I have lost Lily and Potter, and I can't lose Harry again." Hearing this, McGonagall and the other two fell silent. If they could help before, then there would be no need to wait for Dumbledore to take action. The situation was more complicated this time. However, Sirius, McGonagall and other Hogwarts professors did not seem to notice, although Snape on the side also had some concerns on his face. But this concern was mixed with some expectations. Especially when he heard Lily's name just now, a look of hope appeared in the depths of his eyes. Sirius saw the silence of the three deans, and walked back and forth a few steps, revealing obvious anxiety and panic in his steps. "Otherwise, I will go to the United States to find Principal Dumbledore now," Sirius said with a determined look. Let him come back to save Harry. He did not seem to consider the various situations that the American wizarding world might encounter if it lost Dumbledore, a strong ally. This, unlike Sirius, whose eyes were blinded by Harry's affairs, McGonagall understood the consequences behind this behavior. After hesitating for a moment, he asked Madame Pomfrey, "Madame Pomfrey, can Harry's current condition be apparated over a long distance? If possible, I will take him. I will take Harry to the United States. Dumbledore may not be able to leave the United States now, but if the situation permits, he can take Harry to the United States to seek treatment." After hearing this, Madame Pomfrey was silent for a moment and slowly shook her head. "It is not recommended to take Harry to the United States." Then she began to explain, "The United States is a little far away from us, and Harry's soul is a little unstable now. If you perform apparition over a long distance, it is very likely to aggravate his soul pollution, and even his body will be traumatized." Hearing this, Sirius's hands and feet were a little cold, but he seemed to be unable to think of any solution. He could only stare at Harry lying on the bed with a painful look on his face, and despair appeared on his face. Soul pollution. He was very familiar with it. When wizards study black magic, it is very easy to pollute their souls. Although they will try all kinds of methods to do it, as long as they come into contact with black magic, they will eventually be unable to escape soul pollution. Therefore, there will be obvious problems with the emotions of black wizards. The stronger they are, the easier it is to go to extremes. Flitwick, who was standing by, hesitated after hearing this, and said tentatively, "How about we try to transform Harry's soul, which can at least alleviate some of the pain." Hearing this, Sirius jumped and subconsciously wanted to refuse. Of course, he opened his mouth, but never said anything. In the face of the soul pollution problem of dark magic, dark wizards have used many means. Some may play a significant role, but some are also negligible. Soul transformation is a more mainstream way. Through blood, magic, even magical creatures, potions, etc., one can make his soul more resilient or more adaptable to the erosion of dark magic. This can effectively reduce the problem of soul pollution. Voldemort's most famous Horcrux has a similar effect. It can be said that soul transformation is a standard for powerful dark wizards. But for a little wizard, soul transformation also has risks, just like surgery, and it is a major surgery. If it is done well, it is to save a life. If it is not careful, it is the death of life. At this moment, everyone fell into silence, and the atmosphere was very depressing. It seemed that everyone was hesitating whether to transform their souls. Sirius was particularly conflicted. This was not a stranger's child, but his godson. He would rather take all the pain on Harry's behalf, even if it was 10,000 times, or 1,000 times, 10,000 times, because he deserved it. Suddenly, a voice that was a little cold, but mixed with a hint of concern sounded. I think we can go find Lockhart. Chapter 505, Reflection of the World, Snape's Desire. Kamar-Taj, a secret space. Ding, ding, ding. The crisp bells rang, and the originally silent building began to become noisy. A large number of students walked out of the classroom, playing and frolicking in the square and on the lawn, making Kamar-Taj appear full of vitality. McGonagall, standing in front of the window of the high-rise building, looked down at everything in front of her. For some reason, she felt mixed emotions. Compared with Hogwarts, Lockhart's Kamar-Taj is larger. It may be because this is a secret space world, so the variety of buildings and terrains is beyond McGonagall's imagination. She saw tea houses made of bamboo, houses made of wood, palaces carved from marble, and even khaki pyramids, steel skyscrapers, and so on. What shocked her even more was that she actually saw an island floating in the air here. And Mike raised his head and looked up into the sky. The reflection of a constantly changing world slowly changed in his eyes. Seeing the familiar Great Britain, the sandy Egypt, the icy Antarctic, the vast ocean, and the extremely prosperous Smuggle City, it is changing all the time. Some are so fast that they flash by, and some are so slow that you can see the movements of some people inside. It makes people suspect that this is happening in real time somewhere in the real world. Looking at this scene in front of her, as the Deputy Headmaster Minerva McGonagall, she couldn't help but have an impulse in her heart to go back and make a good transformation for Hogwarts. The style, grade, or style should not be too far behind Kamar-Taj. However, the most important thing now is Harry. McGonagall turned around and walked towards the recuperation room at the back. She pushed open the wooden door, and the warm sunlight shone on Harry's face, making his pale face flash a little red. Sirius and Snape surrounded him on both sides, paying attention to Harry's current state. Not far away, Lockhart's students Remy and Vera were quietly standing aside, waiting for something. Mr. Black, don't worry. In Kamar-Taj, within the radiation range of the dream world, the alien energy will only be suppressed. Vera soothed softly. Even the soul, under the protection of the dream world, will not deteriorate in a short time. Sirius looked at his godson Harry Potter, whose expression had eased a lot, nodded, thanked him casually, and continued to focus on his godson. As for wanting to completely solve Harry's problem, we have to wait a little longer. Everything will be easy after the teacher arrives. Vera continued to add, and Sirius still nodded, and said thank you perfunctorily. Most of his energy was still on Harry, and Vera didn't care, but focused his eyes on Snape on the side. Professor Snape, come and have a drink of water, Remy said flatteringly. Before, he followed Professor Snape to learn to make potions. Although he was scolded a lot because of his talent, but with the skills taught by the potion master, he was still able to make a lot of potions. And this is still due to Professor Snape's unreserved teaching. Well, for me, it is good to have a good relationship with Professor Snape. The benefit is not that you can learn advanced skills, but that you can choose to exchange some high quality potions, even if you have to pay some price. For example, the Felixi. Where is Lockhart? Snape sat on the chair, took the fruit handed over by Vera, and asked. Professor, the tutor will be here soon. It should be soon. Lei Ming said ambiguously. He really didn't know. Professor, the tutor is still adjusting in the depths of the dream world and can't leave easily. Vera added beside him, after finishing the things at hand. He should be here soon. At this moment, McGonagall was a little surprised to see Sirius and Snape, who enjoyed completely different treatments, but she didn't say much. She stood quietly beside him and carefully watched Harry's current state. Flitwick and Sprout, the two deans, had classes, so they didn't follow together. As the vice president, she was very easy to arrange courses. Soul detection. McGonagall cast a detection spell on Harry. Feeling that Harry's soul was wrapped by a vast and warm power, close to a state of stillness, he nodded. Lockhart's dream world still has many benefits. At this moment, suddenly, buzz. In the bright and white training room, a transparent human-shaped energy projection slowly emerged. "Hello, teacher," Remy and Vera said in unison. "Lockhart, you are finally here," Sirius immediately urged when he saw the scene of Lockhart emerging. "Look at Harry, do you know how to solve it?" Lockhart nodded slightly to Sirius, without replying, and glanced at Harry Potter lying on the bed, and then set his sights on Snape. The two looked at each other, looking at Snape's excited eyes. Lockhart seemed to know what the other was thinking, and nodded slightly. "Don't worry, with me here, Harry will be fine," Lockhart promised the three people. Then, he walked in front of Harry and waved gently. A group of pale yellow ripples covered Harry's brain, or rather, entered the depths of his soul. Whoosh, whoosh, the breeze outside the window blew, and a pale yellow brain illusion appeared above Harry. Everyone present could clearly see that there was a relatively obvious grey-black part in the pale yellow brain. Obviously, this was the backlash from the black magic. And Snape, at this moment, focused his attention completely on the black spot. No, to be precise, it was a piece of black glass in the middle. Horcrux fragment. Around this fragment, a lot of golden silk threads emerged, entwined with this soul fragment. Feeling the familiar breath, Snape was a little excited, and even felt a tear in his eyes. This is the magic that Lily loves, with her breath and her traces. This magic is restricting, or protecting Harry's soul, so that he can grow up healthily. Lockhart. Snape hadn't finished speaking yet, and Lockhart waved his hand to interrupt. "Everyone keep quiet, I need to further analyze Harry's soul, to protect him from Voldemort's influence. Yes, Harry's accident still originated from the Horcrux fragment. Voldemort and Tom's horrific mass killings completely stimulated the darkness and madness of the soul. The Horcrux fragments were also inevitably affected. Moreover, the resentment and fear of a large number of goblins after their death entangled Voldemort and Tom, then spread to each Horcrux. There is no need to worry about pure Horcruxes. After all, Voldemort's soul fragments have been tempered in various ways. But for a young wizard like Harry with a relatively fragile mind, the pollution of the soul seems easy and more critical. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 506. Lily, I was entrusted by Snape to help you revive, kill, go, revenge for the dead companions, rise up for the goblins, kill, Avada Kedavra. Woo, Mom, where is Mom? It's so dark, so cold, I'm scared. Endless darkness and blood intertwined, blood flowing everywhere, pale bones, painful wails and desperate struggles. These nightmare-like scenes once made Harry collapse. He kept running and struggling, trying to escape from the blood nightmares in front of him. If it weren't for the faint intimate golden light that emerged from the depths of his soul every time he fell into a desperate situation of collapse, maintaining the last bit of clarity in his heart, he would have turned into a puppet by now. Despite this, he was alone in the darkness, killing every goblin with empathy, seeing their pleas for mercy and hearing their wails. The original fear and pity gradually turned into indifference. It seemed that he was not opposed to killing. Even looking at the painful expressions on their faces, his heart began to enjoy it. He began to crave blood and darkness. He was a little angry. Why could he only watch and not participate in this grand feast of killing? Yes, this was no longer a battlefield, but a grand feast. A wonderful feast about magic and killing. It seemed that there was some truth of killing here. Simply watching could not satisfy him. He wanted to enjoy the scene of blood dripping on his body. He wanted to wave his wand and see the other party struggling and praying desperately. He wanted to. But the golden light in the depths of his soul emerged again, and the familiar warmth gradually enveloped Harry's soul. A trace of black and red mist was gradually expelled. Harry, who regained his clarity, felt the fear in his heart again. He clearly remembered his thoughts just now. He was not only afraid of the nightmare in front of him, but also afraid of his indifferent self. Woo, Mom, I miss you. Feeling the familiar warmth, Harry, who was only a teenager, seemed to start crying. He missed his mother, Hermione, Ron, Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Hogwarts, and everything. Oh, and there was Professor Lockhart, who had always encouraged him. However, good times are always short-lived. When Mother Lily's magic expelled a certain amount of soul pollution, it seemed that the Horcrux fragments were more threatening. She began to go back to block the Horcruxes. The golden light on the surface of the soul disappeared, and darkness and blood fell again. Another reincarnation came. Harry was a little desperate. He seemed to see his future vaguely. Even with his mother's magic, he would collapse and die in this cycle of pollution and purification. Blood gradually entered Harry's soul. The originally bright eyes were also stained with a touch of black. The frightened Harry gradually laughed, and the laughter became louder and louder. Ha ha ha, kill everything, indulge in killing, fairies, all deserve to die. But I don't know how long it took, and it seemed that Harry's situation had reached a critical moment again. The golden light gradually emerged, and the golden raindrops soaked into Harry's soul, washing away wisps of black and red stains. Mother Lily's magic took effect again, and Harry's eyes, which had been dark, returned to their normal green color. Mom, Dad, Harry was desperate, helpless in such a dark world. He tried to call Hermione and Ron, but to no avail. He prayed to the professors at Hogwarts to save him, but there was no response. And the wizard he trusted the most, and whom he thought was the most powerful, Headmaster Dumbledore, did not show up either. Here, the only thing that made him feel safe was his mother's magic. The warm breath made him seem to see a woman and a man. The man and the woman held hands, looking at him with warm and firm eyes, encouraging him. This is Dad and Mom. Harry was very sure in his heart, without any doubt. Save me, Dad, Mom. Harry sobbed softly. His tone was low, as if he was praying in despair. However, as if sensing some kind of increasing danger, the golden light gradually faded again. Feeling the familiar breath disappear again, Harry began to shout, as if he had grabbed the last straw to save his life. Don't leave, don't leave. Mom, Dad, don't. Harry's call seemed to have alarmed some existence. Darkness and blood gradually came, and crazy dark thoughts appeared in Harry's heart again. This time, he seemed to want to be free. Reincarnation again and again, too painful. Life can't be born. Death can't die. The feeling of life is worse than death. It's better for everything to return to silence, return to the great death. His thoughts were so firm that his instincts began to agree. It was too painful, he needed to be free, and death was the best way. The thoughts had never been so strong, and the emotions of darkness and killing were like raw materials to water Harry's deep obsession. The will became tough, the desire became strong, and the obsession became firm. Harry turned sideways and looked in a certain direction. He could sense that there was something hidden there that was directly related to his life. Harry did not take any action. The space was changing, and the darkness and blood gradually thickened, as if reaching a certain source. This is his soul space. When he thinks strongly about a place, he is there. As Harry stared at the front end differently, his eyes were faintly black, indifferent, cold, and seemed to have no emotions at all. No, to be precise, there was only one emotion, that is destruction, destruction, and destruction. A faint golden light wrapped around a black crystal. The black crystal bloomed with evil black and red mist, which seemed to be the source of everything. On the surface of the crystal, faint golden threads intertwined with each other, forming a large golden net that enveloped and filtered the black and red mist. But because there was too much mist, only a very small amount could be purified. At the same time, every time the black crystal trembled, as if it was ready to move away, the golden net would tremble slightly, and then begin to shrink. The focus was placed on imprisoning this black crystal, or the fragment of the Horcrux. There was no time to purify the released black and red mist. The black and red mist became thicker and thicker, and continued to pour into Harry's soul, stimulating the depths of Harry's soul. The emotion of self-destruction became stronger. As Harry slowly raised his hands, he walked towards the golden purification net. As if sensing some kind of crisis, the golden thread began to tremble, and a kind of humming sound could be heard faintly. It seemed to be calling, reminding, or calling back Harry's lost sanity. But perhaps the pollution of the soul had reached a deep level, and Harry could not control himself at all. Or maybe he was only 13 or 14 years old, and could not bear the pain brought by the pollution and purification cycle again and again. For him, death and self-destruction were the way to liberation. But the magic of love that came from Lily's sacrifice of her own life seemed to know the desperate situation at the moment and began to tremble constantly, and a large amount of golden light began to burst out in all directions. Two figures, a man and a woman, gradually emerged and began to solidify. Harry, wake up, don't let the darkness swallow your heart. A gentle female voice sounded, and after Harry heard it, his body trembled, and the black mist in his eyes seemed to begin to dissipate. Mom. A low moan sounded, and for some reason, a cry was faintly heard, mixed with strong sadness. Just hearing the sound, one can't help but feel pity and heartache. However, it seemed that something bad was happening. The Horcrux fragments kept shaking, as if struggling, trying to hinder the interaction between the two sides, and strengthen the influence on Harry. The two golden figures looked sideways, with worried expressions on their faces, and then turned back to look at Harry, who was covered in black mist. They looked at each other, and a trace of determination flashed in their eyes. Immediately, the golden light bloomed again, but this time, the golden threads began to disintegrate, and wisps of golden mist enveloped the black crystal, expelling all abnormal soul pollution around. In a blink of an eye, the black and red mist that originally filled the surroundings was replaced by the golden soul mist. At this moment, the two figures began to become illusory. They held hands and gradually walked towards the black crystal, the soul fragment of Voldemort. Every few steps, they turned their heads to look at Harry, who was still motionless and struggling not far away. Their eyes were filled with love and nostalgia. As they got closer to the Horcrux fragments, the figures became more and more illusory. The Horcrux fragments seemed to sense some fatal danger and struggled hard, but were imprisoned. No, don't. Harry cried and shouted to the distance, while running towards them. His parents' efforts restored him to normal again. However, he was very clear about what was happening in front of him. This was his parents sacrificing their last strength to buy more time for him. Although Harry kept running forward, for some reason, the distance between his mother's transparent figure and himself did not seem to change at all, and even became longer and longer. Looking at the increasingly transparent figures of his parents in the distance, Harry fell into despair again. It was a very lucky thing to be able to see his dead parents. However, seeing them choose to die again to protect themselves, this was also a great stimulation to Harry. No, Mom, Dad, don't. Running, and running forward continuously, shouting, and shouting loudly. But the distance still did not close, and the two figures did not look back again. They took firm steps, and walked towards Voldemort's Horcrux fragments. At the same time, all kinds of pale golden runes appeared around, densely packed and spectacular. At this moment, they kept colliding and combining, emitting warm and dazzling golden light. It seemed to be leaving the last swan song. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Lily and Potter walked in front of the Horcrux fragments. After a slight silence, they turned their heads and forgot to look at their son who kept running towards them. A look of pity appeared on their faces. It seemed that they felt sorry for all Harry's experiences over the years. But then, they turned back and looked at the struggling Horcrux fragments. Pity was replaced by determination. They were dead people, using the last soul mark to protect their son. This was beautiful enough. But Lily held her husband Potter with her left hand, raised her right hand at the same time, and slowly touched forward. And Potter did the same. But the dazzling golden light bloomed in an instant, and the Horcrux fragments seemed to be strongly corroded. A strong black and red gas began to burst out to resist. Golden light. No, it should be said that the magic of love purifies everything. At the same time, the two soul phantoms began to disintegrate at a speed visible to the naked eye as the golden light bloomed. Harry ran hard, as if he knew that this might be the last time he saw his parents. Before his palms completely touched, the cold dark chill and crazy killing intent began to come. His whole body bloomed as if burning, and the golden flame began to burn everything. Like the last madness, this golden flame wrapped around the Horcrux fragments. Purification, blocking all the other sides back up. The two looked at the Horcrux fragments wrapped in golden flames, and their faces showed determination. Then, the two were ready to step in and sacrifice their last bit of strength. At this moment, suddenly, Hey, Lily, it doesn't matter if Potter died, you can't die so easily. Otherwise, how can I explain to Snape? A plain male voice sounded, and Lily and Potter suddenly looked up and stared at the opposite side. A familiar figure appeared on the other side of the Horcrux fragments. Lockhart. Lily exclaimed softly, "How did you get in?" Then, as if she had reacted, she asked anxiously, "Can you solve Harry's current problem?" Potter, who was sitting on the same plate, also spoke anxiously, "Lockhart, what's the situation outside? Where's Principal Dumbledore?" The two hid in the depths of Harry's soul, sometimes waking up and sometimes sleeping. Naturally, they knew Lockhart's achievements at this time. But they didn't know anything about Dumbledore's recent outing. At this moment, Lockhart looked at the Horcrux fragment in front of him with great interest. Feeling the distant, yet close connection between the Horcruxes and the Solaria, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It can be used as a reference in the dream world. Lockhart thought silently, then raised his head and looked at Potter and Lily opposite him. Principal Dumbledore has something to do and has gone abroad. The professors at Hogwarts are helpless with Harry's current state, so they asked me to come and solve the problem. Lockhart said calmly, his eyes still fixed on the Horcrux fragments below. With a gentle wave of his hand, a lavender light shone, and it fell into the Horcrux fragments like raindrops. Feeling the information constantly emerging in his heart, Hart nodded slightly. Then, he glanced at Harry, who was still running forward not far away, and raised the corner of his mouth slightly, and then set his sights on Lily. "Long time no see, Lily. Your current condition is not good," Lockhart said calmly. Hearing this, Lily and Potter both laughed bitterly. "We are dead. What condition can we talk about?" Potter said bitterly. "Really?" Lockhart said with some playfulness, "But in my eyes, your condition is not completely dead yet." Hearing this, the two of them looked up suddenly, as if there was another meaning in Lockhart's words. "Lily, I was entrusted by Snape. Help you revive." Chapter 507, The Birth of the Third Voldemort. Snape. When Lily heard this familiar name, her illusory figure began to fluctuate. It seemed to explain her complicated inner feelings. "Lockhart, you can help Lily revive." James Potter on the side immediately grasped the key point and asked impatiently. Lily's resurrection had already made him overjoyed. As for Snape's request, he did not doubt it at all. He had no good feelings for this Slytherin who had been spying on his wife. However, it is undeniable that Snape's love for Lily was very pure. "Yes." Lockhart nodded lightly and said, "For Lily, Snape paid a lot of price. Of course, his contribution is also worth my help in Lily's resurrection. Whether it is the original body or the current self, the relationship between Harry's parents is below a friend and above a stranger, or a familiar stranger. The relationship between the two is limited to the fact that they both went to school at Hogwarts. There is basically nothing else." Snape. Lily hesitated for a moment before asking, "How is he doing recently? I heard that he is now the head of Slytherin College and a professor at Hogwarts." "Snape is not bad," Lockhart said calmly. "He is also the professor of potions at Kamar-Taj and has helped me a lot." "That's good." Lily nodded calmly and said, "As for resurrection, there is no need." Lockhart was a little surprised by Lily's refusal. Soon, Lily also gave her own explanation. "I was originally a dead person, and I died a long time ago in everyone's mind. Even if I come back to life, it really doesn't make much sense." It sounds like a reasonable explanation. But in fact, Principal Lockhart, don't listen to Lily's excuses, just resurrect. James Potter said in an affirmative tone, "If you need anything, you can speak directly. I will fully cooperate." As he said, Potter turned around and showed a concerned look. "Lily, I know what you are thinking. Don't have any concerns. This opportunity is once in a lifetime." James Potter turned around and hugged Lily, saying softly. He knew what Lily was thinking. It was nothing more than either two people died together or two people lived together. But with Lockhart, no, to be more precise, Snape, Lily's resurrection, James Potter didn't have too many worries. As for himself, he saw it clearly. Snape didn't ask Lockhart to destroy himself, which was already good enough. He didn't hope that Snape would ask Lockhart to help him resurrect. Now, one person can live. Harry is waiting to be rescued, and he also needs a relative. Hearing what her husband Potter said, Lily looked like she refused. The two sides were husband and wife, living together for many years, and they knew each other very well. Lily knew very well what Potter was thinking, just as Potter knew what Lily was thinking at the moment. Lily, Harry needs you now. Seeing Lily opening her mouth to say something to refute, Potter immediately interrupted. This is your magic. You should know Harry's current state very well. He needs a relative who cares about him and helps him reduce the impact of soul pollution. Only you are the most suitable. Hearing this, Lily opened her mouth to say something, but in the end she remained silent. But the sadness on her face was very obvious. She knew her husband's choice very well. So, Lockhart, what price do I have to pay to help my husband resurrect? For Lily, who had just graduated less than a year ago and had become a well-known potion master, she would not give up the possibility of her husband's resurrection. She also knew that the most familiar stranger in front of her would play a key role. Her resurrection was related to Snape. Then, let herself become the key to Potter's resurrection. Husbands and wives should devote themselves to each other. Lily thought so, and she did so. If you need some magic or related potion experience, I can help you. Lily said calmly, with a pleading tone. I only have one request, that is to help Potter resurrect at the same time. Lockhart stood in front of the two, observing their emotions. No, to be precise, the feelings between the two. He couldn't help but shake his head slightly. Hey, why do I feel that Snape is so difficult? However, from the perspective of Snape's friend, Lockhart shook his head and refused. Sorry, Lily, Snape only asked me to help you with your resurrection. Then, he said meaningfully, you should know that resurrection is not a simple matter. Snape's efforts for your resurrection are far beyond your imagination. Hearing this, Lily fell into silence. Potter on the side opened his mouth, but did not speak. Resurrection has always been a difficult research topic in the wizarding world. Ordinary wizards are just fantasies. Only powerful wizards have the resources to conduct research, and those who can get results are undoubtedly top wizards. Lily, listen to me. Potter saw that Lily seemed to be about to persuade again, and interrupted her again. He walked to her side, stared into Lily's dark green eyes, and said in a gentle but firm tone, I love you, even in death. This love will not change. I hope you are alive, and can take care of our children. Looking at the affectionate gaze between the two, Lockhart looked calm, as if he was not the one being fed dog food. Snape, what do you think? While the two were talking, Lockhart turned his head and looked at a certain place. His lips moved slightly, as if conveying some information. At this moment, Snape, who was hiding his figure, looked at Lily and Potter entangled with each other with a very complicated expression. His idea was very simple. Potter must die, and Lily must live. So, seeing this scene between the two, his heart was extremely complicated. Snape, what do you think? Lockhart asked again. Silence, still endless silence. Snape was very entangled. No, to be more precise, he was very painful in his heart. Resurrect Lily first. After a long silence, Snape said with a bitter voice. He no longer thought about Potter's affairs, because the more he thought about it, the more annoyed he became, and the more he thought about it, the more he couldn't help but feel angry. Okay. Lockhart nodded gently, indicating that he understood. He has eaten a lot of melons recently, and this is the first time he has eaten melons about living and dead people. Lily, we'll talk about Potter later. Lockhart said calmly, I'll help you revive first, and we'll talk about the rest later. This is what I promised Snape. As soon as the words fell, Lily opened her mouth, as if she was about to say something, but Lockhart shook it lightly, and the wand appeared in his hand. As the wand waved, familiar magical fluctuations emerged, as if stimulated, and the surrounding soul space began to see strong fluctuations. Not far away, Potter's figure began to collapse, and the black and red mist gradually disintegrated and dissipated. The wand continued to wave, and purple runes gradually emerged. The soul space, which was originally dark and bloody, gradually glowed with purple light. It seemed to sense some kind of crisis. The black Horcrux fragments began to tremble wildly. This was the most intense one in history. Not far away, Harry began to hold his head and wail, and his soul body seemed a little illusory. In the eyes of McGonagall and Sirius and the outside world, Harry's body kept twisting and twitching on the bed, as if stimulated by something. Fortunately, Remy waved his wand and restrained Harry physically. Otherwise, he would have fallen under the bed. Lockhart, is Harry okay? Sirius was a little anxious and asked Lockhart, who closed his eyes in a rather anxious tone. However, Lockhart did not reply at all. Most of his energy was now focused on the Horcrux fragment deep in Harry's soul. Even if he heard it, he was too lazy to answer. Sirius, don't worry. McGonagall comforted him. Have some confidence in Lockhart. McGonagall witnessed the changes during this period of time. In her heart, Lockhart was at the same level as Dumbledore. Therefore, what Lockhart said should probably be fine, and what was lacking was just time. But the Black Horcrux fragment was connected to Harry's originally pure soul. As time passed, the two seemed to have the same rhythm of merging into one. Harry's originally pure soul was gradually stained with a wisp of black. This gave Harry a strong talent in magic, especially in the field of dark magic. This time, the negative emotions of killing and darkness continued to pour in. For Harry's soul, the impact and transformation are becoming more and more profound, especially with each round of pollution, coupled with purification. In the continuous reincarnation, the Horcrux fragments are more and more closely connected to Harry's soul. Harry's mind has also undergone certain changes. It can't be said to be good, but it can't be said to be bad. It can only be said that Harry seems to have embarked on another path. Feeling the close connection between the Horcrux fragments and Harry, Lockhart raised his eyebrows and showed an interested look on his face. It seems that the two have a rhythm of integration. No, to be precise, in the endless cycle of pollution and purification, Harry seems to have swallowed a small part of the soul fragments. I'm afraid that he has also gained some of Voldemort's memories. TSK. Is this going to become the Harry Potter version of Voldemort? No, or call it the Voldemort version of Harry Potter? When he thought that the third Voldemort might be born in his hands, Lockhart couldn't help but get a little excited. The wand waved, and the light blue soul wind slowly blew up. The power of dreams was blessed, and the power of the soul was infused. Broken, worn away, corroded, transformed. The soul wind slowly passed through the Horcrux fragments, and wisps of black powder began to emerge. As the light blue soul wind carried the Horcrux powder and scattered around, Harry, who was originally in great pain, gradually calmed down. Moreover, his soul aura began to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. This surprised McGonagall and Sirius and the outside world. But they didn't think much about it. They were just very excited and impressed by how superb Lockhart's craftsmanship was. If you want to revive Lily, you must first wear away the Horcrux fragments. Lily's love magic and the Horcrux fragments have been entangled with each other for more than 10 years. Only when one disappears can the other be free. The soul wind blew repeatedly, and the black powder transformed by the Horcrux fragments became the nourishment of Harry's soul. The original diamond-shaped Horcrux fragments shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. The golden runes entangled nearby became brighter and brighter. It seemed that this was the first time in many years that he had the upper hand and gained an overwhelming advantage. This is the Horcrux that the Dark Lord has always relied on, Snape said on the side. The tone was very calm, but a trace of loneliness could not help but be heard from it. Yes. Lockhart nodded and praised. Apart from the side effects of mixing, I have to admit that this is a good thing. Making a backup of your own soul is simply a sharp weapon for resurrection, and its sturdiness is also terrifying. If it weren't for the power of the dream world, it would be difficult to crush the Horcrux. Hearing Lockhart's evaluation and praise, Snape's expression moved slightly, as if some ideas emerged in his mind. He hesitated for a moment and said, there are many dangers in the new world, especially involving the existence of dimensional gods. Can the Horcrux play a protective role? In this regard, Lockhart was silent for a while, and did not give a clear answer. He was not sure. Don't think about it for now, and talk about it later. Continue to wear down this fragment of Voldemort's Horcrux. Well, this can also be regarded as a test of what effect the fragment of the Horcrux can achieve. Soon, the last black Horcrux powder flew into Harry's soul space. The entire soul space was filled with light golden love magic. At this moment, Harry stood in the center of the soul space. He hugged his mother tightly. Feeling the warm breath in his arms, Harry's eyes were filled with tears. But for some reason, his expression was still calm, or indifferent. "Professor Lockhart, I'm sorry to bother you with my mother's matter," Harry said calmly, not like a 13 or 14-year-old wizard, but like an adult. This made Lockhart look interested, but he still nodded. "Harry, don't worry, since I promised, I will do it." The next moment, Lockhart's spirit returned to the recuperation room, and Harry, lying on the white bed, slowly opened his eyes. But it seemed that no one else noticed. A light golden light flashed faintly with Lockhart's return. "This is Lily's soul mark." Snape has been paying attention, and after seeing it, excitement and joy appeared on his face. "Lily is finally resurrected. Harry, how do you feel?" Sirius saw Harry, who had just woken up, and asked with great concern, "Are you thirsty or hungry? You have been sleeping for a whole day." "Yes, Harry, are you feeling uncomfortable? Tell me quickly, and we will solve it together." McGonagall beside him also comforted him. "Godfather, Professor McGonagall, don't worry, I have no problem," Harry replied calmly. "In fact, the feeling at this moment is the best I have ever been." Faced with Harry's attitude, that was very different from usual, McGonagall was a little surprised, but she glanced at Lockhart next to her and said nothing. "Principal Lockhart, thank you for your help this time." Harry stood up and bowed slightly to express his gratitude to Lockhart. Harry's maturity once again surprised Sirius and McGonagall, but the next sentence shocked them. "Principal Lockhart, thank you for your help with my mother's resurrection. Is there anything you need to tell me?" Chapter 508 Voldemort's version of Harry Potter. Resurrection? McGonagall was a little dazed when she heard this. The only time she heard something related to resurrection recently was the resurrection of the Dark Lord Voldemort. And hearing it again from Harry's mouth, she couldn't help but feel incredible. "Lockhart, are you sure?" Sirius shouted in great surprise. "Lily can really be resurrected. When will it start? How to do it? Is there anything I can help with? Can James, too?" Hearing Sirius asking a lot of questions excitedly, Harry frowned slightly on the side. He was a little annoyed because he talked too much. He just wanted to do a good job of resurrecting his mother. However, Sirius was his godfather. He didn't say much. At this moment, Lockhart didn't pay attention to Sirius, who was excited. Instead, he observed Harry's changes with interest, and his pupils with slightly colorful colors showed an admiring look. Harry now is really a perfect work of art. Yes, in Lockhart's eyes, it is a perfect work of art. The originally pure soul has been tempered for a long time in countless cycles of pollution and purification. Then, under the influence of the unpredictable power of dreams, he almost perfectly absorbed the fragments of Voldemort's soul, coupled with Lily's magic of love, and the gift of the soul mark of her parents. TSK, the great growth of soul potential, the talent for magic, especially black magic, has reached a very high level. Moreover, under the influence of the power of dreams, the affinity for the dream world is weird. To be precise, it is second only to Ian and Vera, who have certain rights to the dream world. You know, Harry doesn't even have the rights. Not to mention that, after absorbing a lot of Voldemort's knowledge and experience, Harry's mind has obviously grown. Really, this is a perfect work of art. Of course, there are some shortcomings. In the repeated polishing of the soul, coupled with the influence of Voldemort's fragmented soul, the originally complex emotions began to become a little extreme, or lost a lot. No, to be precise, it is almost Voldemort-like. After all, he absorbed a lot of emotions, memories, and experiences with Voldemort. Now Harry, with a little training, is definitely better than the elite auras. In other words, it is another war machine. "Harry, come to my Kamar-Taj." Instead of directly answering Harry's question, Lockhart invited him. In his previous teaching, Lockhart did not poach students from Hogwarts. On the one hand, it was inconvenient, because of Dumbledore's presence. On the other hand, although some students at Hogwarts have good talents, they are just good, far from being eye-catching. Even Harry Potter did not make Lockhart excited. You know, the last person Lockhart personally accepted as a disciple was the Scarlet Witch Wanda. However, the Harry in front of him is completely different, with powerful soul potential. top magic talent, and an affinity that is so strange that he is like the son of a dream. In addition, he has a mature mind. Really, Lockhart's heart is moved. Professor Lockhart, do you mean that I need to join Kamar-Taj to resurrect my mother? Harry thought for a while and asked back indifferently. Of course not. Lockhart shook his head and said, one thing is one thing. No matter what, I will revive Lily. Is that so? I'm very sorry, Professor Lockhart. I'll stay in Hogwarts. Hogwarts is more suitable for me. Harry Potter apologized in a tone without any apology. It was as if his previous love and admiration for Lockhart was all an illusion. In fact, for some reason, Harry was originally full of good feelings for Lockhart. But now, there is more disgust and fear. Yes, it is unfounded disgust and fear. He just wants to be as far away from Lockhart as possible, even if it is not related to his mother this time. He would choose to remain silent and return to Hogwarts. Compared with Lockhart's Kamar-Taj, Hogwarts can give him a sense of security. Well, if Lockhart understands Harry's heart, it is easy to infer that it is still the influence of Voldemort's Horcrux fragments. The two people now, Voldemort has destroyed them in his own hands. One is imprisoned by himself. One was defeated by himself in front of everyone, especially the imprisoned Tom, who became a research machine in a long time and even suffered punishment. Well, the most essential emotions between Horcruxes are still common. After hearing Harry's refusal, McGonagall on the side immediately smiled, and her previous worries were swept away. As expected of Gryffindor, Harry is great. Excited McGonagall completely ignored the abnormality of Harry's awakening until now. She was afraid that Harry would directly accept Lockhart's invitation. To be honest, considering the differences between the two schools and Harry's good impression of Lockhart's previous teacher, if Harry accepted Lockhart's invitation, McGonagall understood it very well, but she didn't know how to explain it to Dumbledore, who was fighting in the United States. Fortunately, Harry still chose Hogwarts and Gryffindor. After hearing this, Lockhart was slightly stunned and seemed a little surprised by Harry's decisive refusal. But he didn't say much, just nodded gently and said, "Okay, Harry. Kamar-Taj has always opened its doors for you. I promise in the name of Principal Kamar-Taj that this promise will remain valid even after you graduate from Hogwarts." Harry should have been somewhat moved by what Lockhart said. After all, Lockhart's sincerity was full and clearly visible. But for some reason, the deep chill on his back seemed to remind him not to deal too much with Lockhart. Well, Tom's experiences at all seemed to be constantly reminding Harry. "Thank you very much, Professor Lockhart. I will seriously consider your advice," Harry said in a deep voice. At this moment, McGonagall also came back to her senses, walked forward, and asked in an inquiring tone, "Lockhart, what exactly did you say about Lily's resurrection? Are there any negative effects?" As the deputy principal of Hogwarts, he can basically browse all the books in the library without restrictions, even if they are banned books. For wizards, resurrection is an enduring topic. But most resurrection magic, regardless of the success rate, has various drawbacks. As far as Mag knew, some resurrection methods will cause the person to lose their magical abilities, and some would become abnormally bloodthirsty. Some would even change their sex, or even turn into other animals. So, even if Lockhart really had a method of resurrection, Mag would ask if there were any drawbacks. Chapter 509, The Dream Reappears, Lily's Resurrection. Whoosh, whoosh, the breeze blew and hit the green lawn. The golden sunlight was scattered everywhere, and some small magical creatures lay lazily on the lawn, as if they were feeling the peaceful atmosphere at the moment. At this moment, suddenly, on the green lawn, a colorful halo appeared, revealing a mysterious and dreamy atmosphere. The door of dreams. In the blink of an eye, the halo turned into a door and slowly opened. Opposite the door was a bedroom. "I found a quiet place, which is more suitable for holding the resurrection ceremony," Lockhart said gently. As soon as the voice fell, he went straight through the dream door in front of him. Snape followed closely with an impatient pace. Sirius, McGonagall, Remy and others also entered one after another. Harry was the last one to enter, because he looked at the dream door in front of him, and felt a kind of intimacy and familiarity inexplicably, as if some power was calling him. He hesitated a little, gently touched the dream door in front of him, and the magic power in his body began to surge slightly. Then, a large number of images kept pouring into Harry's mind. Towering castles, dark forests, blue oceans, desolate rift valleys. In an instant, it seemed that a vast, grand and dreamy world opened up in Harry's heart. But then, it seemed that some kind of power sensed Harry's existence and suddenly cut off. Harry came back to his senses, looked at the door of dreams with regret, and stepped into the resurrection ceremony in front of him. On the emerald green lawn, a marble platform was quietly built at some point. Lockhart climbed up the steps to the top of the platform. Snape and others followed closely behind, standing on the edge of the platform, quietly watching the scene in front of them. The breeze rose, and the golden sunlight fell on the marble platform. With Lockhart as the center, everyone stood quietly in a circle. Lockhart looked around, stopped his gaze on Harry and Snape for a second or two, and then retracted his gaze. Then, he stretched out his wand, lightly tapped the air, and waved it again. Boom. The originally azure sky suddenly turned colorful. The power of dreams descended with a bang. In a flash, everyone only realized that the scene had changed. The originally azure day quietly disappeared, replaced by the dim night. The high platform was also replaced by a house, and everyone stood in front of the gate. Some had complicated expressions, some couldn't believe it, and some were full of regret. Sirius looked at the familiar house, and couldn't help but lower his head and cover his cheeks with his hands, as if he was shedding some kind of regretful tears. This is the secret house. It is James and Lila's secret house. At the same time, it was he who personally gave the address of this secret house to Peter Pettigrew. This is the root of everything that happened, and the turning point of the future. The tragic death of Harry's parents and the demise of Voldemort. It seems that the entire wizarding world sacrificed Harry's parents in exchange for 10 years of peace. McGonagall looked at everything in front of her, trying to check the loopholes in the environment here. It is impossible to truly travel through time. McGonagall can, very sure. So this can only be an illusion, some kind of realistic fantasy. Snape stood outside the door, motionless, not daring to move forward or backward. It seemed that what happened next was a major blow to him, or rather, his nightmare that lasted for more than 10 years began from then on. But, the weather became gloomy. On the contrary, a faint golden light appeared. This golden light was so conspicuous in the eyes of Snape and McGonagall, but other wizards living nearby seemed to have noticed nothing. Then the black light flashed, and the fat figure of Peter Pettigrew appeared in front of everyone. Behind him were more than a dozen Death Eaters in black robes, and Peter Pettigrew was bowing his head and bending over to say to the Master in front of him, "Master, the Child of Prophecy is inside. Except for Dumbledore, the people of the Order of the Phoenix can't find this place." At this moment, Voldemort's skin was a little pale, but he still maintained a basic human appearance. He nodded gently to Peter Pettigrew. He took the prepared note and took a look at it, and Voldemort's mouth curled up slightly. Now, the safe house carefully set up by Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix is revealed, and he will break the prophecy and become the true king of the wizarding world. Trample, trample, trample. The footsteps sounded, and Voldemort walked into the door. With a wave of his hand, the door was opened and he entered. The Death Eaters behind him entered one by one, and McGonagall, Snape and others who watched all this entered one after another. They seemed to have guessed something, but did not say it out loud. Crackling. Bang, 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 boom, boom. Soon, the sound of spells breaking came from the safe house, with loud shouts and furniture breaking and interweaving. This made Snape close his eyes and couldn't bear to look directly, while Sirius followed the sound and walked deeper. They seemed to know what was going to happen next. The pale Voldemort stood in the bedroom, and the baby Harry lay in the cradle, shaking slightly in the corner due to inertia. Avada Kedavra. The dark green spell light flashed quickly, and James Potter's body replaced it. James. The imprisoned Lily stood aside, shouting in disbelief, her voice full of deep despair. It seemed that she knew her husband was dead. At this moment, Voldemort heard this stupid woman yelling in his ear. He was a little impatient, but he still suppressed it. After all, his most loyal servant was asking him to let this woman go. He agreed to this little thing. However, the child still had to die, and the prophecy had to disappear. Voldemort focused his attention on the baby version of Harry Potter in the corner. Wow. 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 The sound of the baby crying sounded as if he knew that his father was dead. The little hands kept stretching out, as if struggling or crying. At this moment, Harry Potter stood aside, looking at his baby self, and subconsciously touched the lightning scar on his forehead. It seemed that he knew what would happen next. Voldemort was holding a magic wand, staring at the baby in the cradle, with a smile of power on his face. The magic wand was pointed at the baby's head, and a green light was flickering faintly. At the same time, Lily, who was standing next to him, looked at her child with a determined look, and a trace of pity appeared in her eyes. The next moment, click, the picture was still, with the dead James, the determined Lily, the ignorant baby Harry, the murderous Voldemort, and the dark and broken bedroom around. The gloomy picture seemed to foreshadow some ominous possibility. However, the mighty power of the colorful dream began to emerge, rendering everything in front of him. Chapter 510. World Dream, Lilosphere. Real or illusory? This is a question. McGonagall was very confused. Everything was so similar to her memory. No, it is not an exaggeration to say that it was exactly the same. The cold air, the whistling wind, the heat from the fireplace, the desperate roar, the smell of blood. Everything was just like reality. As the deputy principal of Hogwarts, McGonagall knew that advanced illusion magic could indeed achieve such an effect. But how could Lockhart know the scene of Voldemort killing Lily, including those struggling, begging for mercy, and desperate words? All the people who happened at that time were dead. What she knew was that Dumbledore used magic to summon the traces of what happened that night. After the incident, everything was cleaned up by Dumbledore. In other words, everything that happened tonight, except for the dead Lily, James, and Voldemort. Only she and Dumbledore were alive. And yes, there was also the baby Harry. It shouldn't be. And she forgot the details of the environment that night, and Dumbledore couldn't specifically remember the details of the environment. If she hadn't compared it with her own memory, it would have been difficult to find the similarity of this scene. It all seemed real, and the details were more real than reality. It was like time went back, and they arrived at the night when the Dark Lord killed Lily. More importantly, everything she could perceive, the entire Godric's Hollow, was exactly the same as her memory. It was even more comprehensive than her memory. Mag had to doubt whether what she saw was real or illusory. Memory and illusion are far from such a standard. At this moment, Mag secretly waved her wand and cast a spell to distinguish illusions on herself. And the result? There was no feedback, no result. Is this reality? Mag's eyes showed a confused look, and she couldn't wait to tell Dumbledore that she had discovered everything. Trying to find an acceptable answer. Click. At this moment, everyone heard a sound like a broken mirror. The next moment, it was as if time stopped and everything was still. Lily hugged Harry tightly to her chest. Her expression was nervous, but she was determined, and there was a very faint golden light in her emerald eyes, as if she was preparing a spell. Voldemort on the opposite side held a wand and pointed it at Harry Potter, the son of fables on the opposite side. The tip of the wand glowed with a faint green light, as if to indicate that the next spell was the death curse. The baby version of Harry opened his lips slightly. His eyes were confused. His white and tender hands and cute face were very pitiful. All this, coupled with the dim and broken room, seemed to foreshadow some ominous picture. Everyone looked at this scene that could be called a turning point in history and couldn't help holding their breath. And Harry Potter also held his breath. This scene was broken and disordered in his memory. Even now, he really wanted to know all the details of what happened. However, the next moment, the vast colorful dream power began to render everything in front of him like a filter. For some reason, McGonagall felt a breath called reality. This breath came inexplicably, even the first time she encountered it, but she didn't have the confidence in her heart. This is the truth. It seems that, as long as she reaches out, she can touch the real thing. The majestic dream power renders everything in the cottage. The dead bodies on the ground, the broken houses, the hideous Dark Lord Voldemort. All of this seems to become more vivid and vivid. It seems that nothing has changed, but it seems that everything has changed. The real breath. Yes, it feels more real than before. The thought flashed through her mind, and Mag's pupils shrank. Combined with what Lockhart said before, an idea suddenly emerged in her mind. Sure enough, but it can be seen with the naked eye that the majestic colorful dream power, as if responding to some kind of call, quickly poured into Lila's body. At the same time, it seems to be rendered and washed by the dream power. The dilapidated houses around seemed to be wiped by an eraser, and they were constantly fading at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Dark Lord Voldemort began to become illusory, the bodies on the ground became transparent, and the originally dilapidated house was no longer a pure white. Everything began to disappear. The originally dark fantasy world, in the blink of an eye, turned into a pure white space. In the entire white space, there were only McGonagall, Harry Potter, Sirius, Snape and other wizards. Of course, in front of everyone, Lila's slightly illusory figure did not change, and under the influence of the power of dreams, it began to become more and more solid. Illusion, reality. At this moment, Harry Potter watched his mother's resurrection process from virtual to real. His eyes flashed, and he murmured to himself. The memories and magical knowledge hidden deep in his mind kept emerging as if stimulated. He felt an especially kind atmosphere. It was like his home. Slightly raising his hands, Harry looked at his palms, focused his attention, and felt the kindness from the heart. Call. In an instant, a colorful dream power with flowing light appeared on Harry's palms. This scene attracted the attention of Remy and Vera. This dream world belongs to Kamar-Taj. Ordinary wizards can't activate it at all, and they can influence the dream world to a certain extent, only by relying on the dream world authority given by their mentor. Harry Potter on the opposite side has no authority, and is not as old as them. He can actually mobilize the power of the dream world of Kamar-Taj. Although it is only a small amount, it is beyond the imagination of the two. How to say it? I can only say, Harry Potter is worthy of being the savior. Sure enough, there is only a wrong name, not a wrong title. Alas, at this moment Remy and Vera felt envious. As Lockhart's disciples, they know how much their mentor Lockhart values the dream world. It can be said that after returning from the new world, their mentor did not seem to pay too much attention to other things, and all his thoughts were on the dream world. There is no doubt that the future development of Kamar-Taj is related to the dream world. And as one of the foremost trusted disciples of the mentor, if they don't want to fall behind, then the dream world must not fall behind. When I think of this, I envy Harry Potter more and more in my heart. Especially the teacher's invitation to Harry Potter to join Kamar-Taj. At this moment, Lockhart glanced at the dream power wrapped around Harry. He was a little moved. This is the talent of the Son of Dreams. Just this one move has surpassed the efforts of countless wizards. Then, he ignored Harry and focused all his energy on Lila's resurrection. He also needs to concentrate on the resurrection. Communicating the dream of the world, turning the virtual into the real, and manifesting life. This is not a simple matter. Yes, the illusion that Mag was shocked by just now. In a sense, the scene that happened just now was not an illusion, but the residual memory of the world. Therefore, everything will seem so real. This is the subconscious mind ocean of all living beings in the world. It records everything from the birth of magic to the present. It is difficult for wizards to access it, and only top wizards can find clues. The so-called divination, fate, mind and other mysterious fields are closely related to this. Lockhart named it the dream of the world, symbolizing the other side of the world, or the dream of the world. Lockhart, with the help of the power of the dream world, entered it and explored it. It can be said without hesitation that the dream of the world is the most precious treasure of the wizarding world. Everything is recorded, but it is difficult to find. And Lockhart found the scene that happened that year with the help of Lila's soul mark. The memory of the world is very detailed and comprehensive. It is so detailed that the placement and movement of each stone are very clear. This is the dream of the world, comprehensive and detailed. But the side effect is that there is too much information, and it is too cumbersome, and the ability is not enough, which is easy to be backlashed. After all, this is the power of a world. And Lockhart also bears the majestic pressure of a world through the dream world. It has to be said that it is worthy of being a treasure of the world, and the harvest is great. Among them, the resurrection in front of him is also among them. Ha ha. The majestic dream power poured into Lily's body, and her body solidified at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, such a resurrection seems to have triggered a certain reaction mechanism between heaven and earth. In the silent pure white dream space, I don't know when, a faint grey appeared around. The world dream has no consciousness, but its instincts still exist. When information is spied on, it will cover up. When power is lost, it will make up for it. And when someone steals power, it will also resist. Just like now, Lockhart stole the power of the world dream and built a body for Lily, turning from virtual to real. Its resistance has begun. A huge amount of information constantly impacts the dream world, and the vast power of the mind is also trying to assimilate or devour the dream world. However, Lockhart's dream world originates from the existence of the dream dimension. It is itself the essence left by one dimension or the world. Facing the impact and assimilation of information and energy, it easily resists and swallows it. After a while, it seems that the world dream instinctively sensed that something was wrong, or it was time to stop the loss in time, and the original fierce resistance gradually disappeared. At this time, but when Lily's body was completely condensed, a friendly temperament emanated from the surroundings. After feeling Lily's familiar breath, Mag was shocked and revealed a look of nostalgia. It's really too similar. It was exactly the same as Lily in her memory 13 years ago. Lockhart nodded slightly after seeing it. The foundation of the body was laid, and the next step was the soul. He spent so much effort, not just to build a body. You have to know that Lily didn't even have a soul. What was left was just a soul mark. How much effective information can this mark accumulate? The key is to record the memory and emotions at the time of death. The incompleteness needs to be made up. So we have to call on the dream of the world and use his power to improve it. Now this body contains all the information of Lily from birth to death. In other words, there is a blank soul in it. As Lockhart stretched out his wand, a golden mark flew out from the tip and slowly fell into Lily's forehead. The moment the soul mark entered the body, a breath of life emanated from the inside out. The soul mark and the blank soul quickly merged, and all memories kept emerging and rolling in the mind. But the emerald green eyes slowly opened, revealing a feeling of confusion. But soon, her eyes began to solidify, and she focused on the three most familiar people in her memory, McGonagall, Sirius, and Snape. Looking at their slightly old faces, Lily seemed to react. It seemed that many years had passed, and she had just come back to life. Her eyes moved, passing Lockhart and Remy Vera, and stopped at a young man. Looking at his strange yet familiar face, Lily seemed to react, and tears could not stop falling, with a sad expression. James. At this moment, Harry saw his mother in tears, and he was indifferent and a little at a loss. The same was true for Snape on the side. Looking at Lily, who was so weak at the moment, his heart hurt a little, and he couldn't help but want to comfort her. Lily. Snape opened his mouth, ready to say something to congratulate or comfort, but suddenly found that his mind was blank, and he couldn't think of what to say. He was even more at a loss. Lily, congratulations on your resurrection. Lockhart smiled and congratulated. You have just been resurrected, so your memory may not be fully restored. And, given the degree of damage to your soul, you still need to rest for a while. Don't worry, these are minor problems, and Kamar-Taj has ways to solve them. He is not Snape. If it were not for the conditions of Snape's contract, I'm afraid he would never deal with Lily. After hearing this, Lily nodded gently, and with her experience as a potion master, she quickly checked her condition. Lily, this is your wand. Snape, who was originally at a loss, looked at Lily at this moment, and seemed to react. He quickly took out a black exquisite gift box and gently opened it. A 10¼ inch green wicker wand came into view. Looking at the familiar wand, and then looking at Snape's cautious eyes worried about being rejected, Lily was a little silent. Just now, her memory has recovered a lot. The reason for the resurrection is also very clear. This childhood friend paid a huge price to let Lockhart resurrect himself. And the final reason, needless to say, she also knew. After a moment's silence, she seemed to sense the despair and sadness of being rejected on Snape's face. Lily stepped forward, took out the wicker wand, and thanked softly. Thank you, Snape. At this point, Lily's voice was also stuck. She wanted to make up for the price Snape paid, but she didn't know how to make it up. Finally, she set her sights on her son. Feeling the cold breath coming from her son, for some reason, Lily felt a trace of fear in her heart. It seemed that this person was not her son. She had just been resurrected, and her soul intuition was unusually sensitive. She seemed to sense the traces of the Dark Lord who had killed her. "Harry, my son, come here, let me see." Chapter 511. Perfect Harry, Gringotts' sincerity. "Lily, it's really you." Before Harry could speak, Sirius looked at the familiar red-haired witch and shouted excitedly. He couldn't help but take a few steps forward, ready to hug his friend, but he paused, his face full of worry and regret. Because of him, his good friends Lily and James all died tragically. "Mom." Harry hesitated a little, but still called out the name he had dreamed of. For some reason, he felt repulsive to the word mom from the bottom of his heart, but he longed for it deep in his heart. Such a contradiction made him a little at a loss. "Harry." Hearing Harry's brief and obviously hesitant call, for some reason, Lily's eyes suddenly turned red. She couldn't help but take a few steps forward and hugged her son into her arms. "Harry, Harry, my son, Mom is sorry for you." Lily's voice with a slightly crying tone sounded, and Harry, who was originally indifferent, suddenly had red eyes. The emotions suppressed by Voldemort's memory suddenly broke out. He hugged his mother fiercely, without saying a word, just hugging like that, enjoying the warmth of that moment. This is his mother, the dead mother, the mother who protected him with her own life. At this moment, Harry's most primitive instinct prevailed under the stimulation of family affection. The cold temperament under the influence of Voldemort was resolved, and there was a hint of tenderness in the coldness, which made Vera's eyes light up. Sirius saw this scene and immediately stepped back quietly, leaving the scene to the mother and son. And Lockhart continued to look at Harry with surprised eyes. Perfect artwork, it can be said, is a miracle. Originally, the perfect soul in his eyes has been further improved. It is worthy of being the child of destiny in the Harry Potter world. Whether it is the love of the world or the guidance of fate, there is no doubt that Lockhart is really looking forward to Harry more and more. For the dream world, Harry at this moment is more suitable than Wanda. Especially for the dream of the world that integrates into the Harry Potter world. No one is more suitable than Harry. At this moment, Lockhart glanced at Snape who was hesitating next to him, and hesitated a little. Should he take out another promise of resurrection to invite Harry? It seems a bit sorry for Snape to do so. At this moment, Snape looked at his clothes nervously. His hands were sweating from nervousness. What should the first sentence in his mind be? Should he congratulate? Or should he say sorry for what happened that year? Or, at this moment, Snape's heart was so complicated that even Dumbledore could hardly understand it. He wanted to take a step forward, but looking at the mother and son hugging, this step seemed to be frozen and never moved. "Sirius, Professor McGonagall, thank you for helping me take care of Harry." After hugging for an unknown period of time, Lily raised her head and thanked her friends and professors beside her. Then Snape, "Thank you." Looking at Snape who was looking at her from the opposite side, Lily's heart was also complicated, and she had many things to say. But in the end, she still uttered a simple thank you. Hearing Lily's thank you, for some reason, Snape almost shed tears. He turned around quickly and reached out to wipe them. "No, it's okay, this is what I should do." Snape hesitated and said with a little sob. At this moment, Snape was like a child. Seeing this scene, for some reason, Lockhart seemed to see a single dog evolve. Well, evolved into a licking dog. "Lily, in order to revive you, this is the first time I've seen him so hard, even using himself as an experiment." Seeing that the two did not communicate next, the atmosphere was a little awkward. Lockhart couldn't help but interrupt. "Well, the flames in my heart suddenly went up." Lockhart's words broke the deadlock, and Lily hurriedly said, "Thank you, Snape, thank you." At this point, Lily paused, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Thank you for taking care of Harry for me all these years." As soon as the voice fell, McGonagall on the side looked a little strange. How could she remember that Snape seemed to have been targeting Harry? And Snape's expression also flashed a trace of embarrassment, as if he recalled the unbearable past. Seeing everyone's strange expressions, Lily seemed to know something. After all, she had been possessed by Harry's body for a long time, and she roughly knew the relationship between Harry and Snape. However, she also saw Snape's protection of Harry. Although the method was strange, he protected Harry from the Dark Lord after all. "This is what I should do," Snape stuttered, and then kept silent. This made Lockhart on the side stroke his forehead. Where did Snape, who could poison unicorns with his mouth, go? It turned out that he was acting out the first love of a boy. Remy and Vera on the side watched the indoor score at this moment with relish. This was the first time they saw the serious and poisonous Professor Snape so helpless. Well, it's worth commemorating and remembering. This scene must be well preserved. Vera thought silently in her heart that the ring in her hand was shaking slightly. Then, she noticed the half-smiley look of Professor Lockhart, and her heart suddenly jumped, but she still didn't stop recording the scene. At this moment, Lockhart glanced at Vera's little action and didn't care. "It's just recorded with magic. TSK 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 TSK, you know, the entire Kamar-Taj secret space is shrouded in the dream world. I just want to see what happened in any time period, and it can be reproduced realistically. Pausing, speeding up, replaying, and even changing the plot are all easy. However, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is Lily. You have just been resurrected, and most of your soul is supported by pure dream power. In the short term, I don't recommend you to leave Kamar-Taj. You need to master a certain amount of dream power to maintain your existence in the continued reality and further improve your soul," Lockhart kindly reminded. After hearing this, Lily's expression slightly changed, and she nodded to show that she understood. "Well, I will trouble you later, Lockhart." Hearing Lily say this, Lockhart smiled and turned his eyes to Harry. "Harry, do you want to stay in Kamar-Taj for a few days and get together with your parents again? Don't worry about the courses. You can follow the courses of Kamar-Taj for the time being, and you will not miss any courses." Hearing this, Mag next to him glared, as if he heard the ill intentions in Lockhart's words. However, when she saw the look between Lily and Harry, she was in a war of thoughts. Before Harry and the others could speak, McGonagall spoke directly. "Indeed, it should be. After all, Lily has just been resurrected. She should really get familiar with the lost years. It just so happens that I'm also very curious about the teaching process of Kamar-Taj. I will accompany Harry and Lily," McGonagall said with a smile. She praised her own intelligence. Since it is impossible to stop Harry from staying in Kamar-Taj, she might as well accompany him. In any case, Harry, who Albus is optimistic about, cannot be taken away by Lockhart. Otherwise, what will she say when Albus comes back? After hearing what Professor McGonagall said, Lily was thoughtful. Harry nodded slowly and said softly, "Okay, then I'll trouble you for the next few days, Professor." He still had some repulsion and wanted to escape. This was Tom's instinctive feeling. In the morning, Malfoy Manor, study. Unlike the adult Dark Lord Voldemort, the young Tom prefers the sun. He also enjoyed the warmth brought by the warm sun on the railing of the study. When he was at Hogwarts, he actually didn't like sunlight. This habit was developed when he was imprisoned in the Horcrux. To be precise, he was imprisoned by Lockhart and conducted various experiments in the dark all day long. Therefore, he prefers freedom and light. Of course, in addition to fearing Lockhart, he also hates him. Did you sense it? Tom stood in front of the study, closing his eyes to enjoy the sunlight, and suddenly heard a voice from behind. Voldemort sat on the sofa behind him, playing with the U-wand in his hand with interest. It seemed that the sentence just now was not said by him. "You mean the disappearance of another Horcrux? You should know what I mean." Voldemort put down the wand in his hand and said with a little dissatisfaction, "Since it is a cooperation, there is sincerity. If such a situation suddenly occurs, how are you going to deal with it? Could it be that you think you have another brother? Why not?" Tom asked back, "If we can join forces, then Lockhart and Dumbledore will no longer be a problem. A new possibility is revealed in front of us." But, at this point, Tom sighed and shook his head. "The induction is too weak, intermittent, and even a little different from our breath. What have you found?" Faced with the question he raised, Voldemort pondered for a moment and shook his head helplessly. "I don't know either. I'm not even sure if he is really resurrected. Or is the Horcrux broken? How can resurrection be that easy? You should know this. Faced with Voldemort's sigh, Tom was silent. The price he paid was the loss of his freedom. However, he found a way. Thinking about it, Tom began to change the subject. Gringotts is over. Although it has not been fully spread yet, there is already a commotion. I have asked people to prepare for the migration in 2 days. Durmstrang Academy has been arranged. Now tell me your choice. Come with me, or I'll go to Bogsbottom's Academy. Voldemort said directly in an affirmative tone without waiting for them to finish. After the looting of Gringotts, they don't have to worry about resource issues for the time being. Then they should consider development. He needs to have his own territory to conduct his own experiments. It is very difficult for Britain to continue to develop. Grindelwald ran to America. Europe is empty and vast. It is perfect for this. The only thing Voldemort considered was that they could not be too far away, nor too close. If they were far away, with their current strength, they would be at a disadvantage facing Grindelwald and his saints alone. If they were close, the two sides would probably have to fight first. However, given the situation in America, Grindelwald should not have the energy to take care of them. After all, Dumbledore and Turing, the king of goblins, are not that easy to deal with. A large number of dark wizards invaded Gringotts, and Gringotts fell. The wizard's wealth eventually disappeared in the hands of goblins. Can we get our wealth back? Bang! Molly Weasley slammed the Daily Prophet in her hand heavily on the table. On the surface of the Daily Prophet, sensational headlines kept changing. It seemed to be constantly stirring up the anger in people's hearts. Molly Weasley did not escape either. Arthur, our gold galleons. Molly said in a sad tone. I was planning to take my whole family to travel to the ancient East this holiday. It's all ruined, all gone. Arthur Weasley, who was sitting on the sofa reading a newspaper, heard Molly's complaint and said helplessly, Molly, how many gold galleons can we save in the vault with our family's standard? It's okay, we'll put it in our own piggy bank when the salary comes down next month. For their family, saving money is really a rare habit. Most of the time, they will spend money when they have it. For example, the last time they won the lottery, they went to Egypt for a trip. Apart from anything else, they really had a lot of fun. Are you sure you can still pay your salary? Molly said in a faint tone, as if reminding Arthur. The salary of the Ministry of Magic is realized through the transfer of Gringotts. Now there is a problem with Gringotts, and even all the property of the Ministry of Magic has disappeared. Whether this family's salary can arrive on time is really a problem. At this moment, suddenly, bang, outside the window, an owl hit the glass in front of him heavily. Goo, coo, coo. Molly saw the window of the bracelet open, picked up a plate, and put some food suitable for owls on it. Then she took down the envelope at her feet. Time passed by. Molly became more and more excited as she looked at the contents of the envelope. Arthur on the side was very curious and immediately turned his head to look, and then in-depth cooperation between Kamar-Taj and Gringotts. Kamar-Taj, based on the principle of Wizards First, suggested that Gringotts make a complete compensation plan for the loss of Wizards' wealth. The Ministry of Magic highly agrees with the cooperation between the two sides and believes that Gringotts should assume its own responsibilities. Arthur was a little stunned when he saw the content described in the Daily Prophet. This style was inexplicably familiar. But why did it feel so similar to the reports in the Muggle world? As the director of the Ministry of Magic's Department of Prohibition of the Abuse of Muggle Objects, although his position was average, Arthur knew more about the Muggle world than ordinary wizards, and knew it more deeply. Similarly, as a pure-blood family, he could easily see the meaning behind this newspaper. Gringotts is in danger. Kamar-Taj will be the first force to intervene after Gringotts' mistake. Then, Arthur took the Daily Prophet from Molly and read the content attentively. As he read, his expression gradually became solemn. Gringotts sincerely apologizes to the wizards who suffered losses this time. For ordinary wizards who have lost their property, in order to maintain the stability of the wizarding world, Kamar-Taj supports Gringotts' compensation. Chapter 512 Fairy. This time, Mr. Goo will pay for the loss. In the morning, Gringotts. Let me in first. Give me back my gold galleons. Give me back my gold galleons. Loud voice. Damn goblins, if you don't give the Pravis family an explanation today, I will tear down your Gringotts. Outside the gate of Gringotts, the wizards of AI crowded and screamed. From time to time, the sound of curses and various dissatisfaction spread throughout the entire Diagon Alley. If there were not a large number of auras holding wands and staring at them, I'm afraid that some impatient wizards would have already taken action. Fortunately, there were no goblins outside the gate of the ancients, and I'm afraid that, even if they were bitten, they would be stimulated to take action. It is really hateful. They have worked hard to accumulate wealth for many years, and believe in Gringotts' reputation as the world's first and safest. As a result, the safest place was robbed. Damn goblins, even if they were torn into pieces, they could not offset their anger for losing their wealth. In this situation, although the newspapers have been emphasizing that Gringotts will compensate everyone for their losses, but as long as they are not stupid, normal people know that there may be compensation, but how can it be more than the gold galleons and wealth they lost? Even this compensation may be taken away by those pure blood families. When can ordinary wizards like them stand up? When can they get back what belongs to them? Disappointment is accumulating, and anger is swelling. Then, click, click, click. With the sound of clicks, the door of Gringotts slowly opened. Two figures, one tall and one short, walked out. Seeing the familiar face, the originally angry wizards were stunned for a moment, wiping their eyes, and seemed a little unbelievable. Gilderoy Lockhart, what's going on? Professor Lockhart, Principal Kamar-Taj, why are you standing next to the goblin? Damn, I knew that these pure-blood wizards and Gringotts have been colluding. The original surprised and puzzled voices were gradually infected by anger, and began to curse Lockhart and Kamar-Taj. After hearing this, Lockhart did not stop it, but smiled indifferently. Nothing can leave a deeper impression on you than a slap in the face. Although the form is different, the effect is the same. Loud voice. Principal Lockhart, why are you standing with Gringotts? You must give us an explanation. Yes, yes, did you embezzle our gold galleons? I know these purebloods are greedy and bully others with their power. The furious curses rang out, and the atmosphere seemed to be ignited at once. Let the side maintain support, and our subconscious hands are sweating, ready to take action at any time. The movement is really too big. At this moment, even they feel a little resentful about Lockhart's appearance. The matter is already big enough, but you, such a famous figure, still ran out and stood in Gringotts. The most hateful thing is that you said nothing and let these wizards get emotional. Isn't this clearly provoking trouble? The aura kept complaining in his heart, but his face became more and more serious. When the crowd was excited, suddenly, cough, cough, cough. A light cough sounded, and the sound seemed very slight, but strangely, it was clearly heard by every wizard present, as if the other party was coughing next to their ears. And this cough seemed to carry some kind of magic, and the original anger seemed to be drawn out all at once. Along with the inner calmness, a sense of powerlessness surged into the heart. This feeling made some dark wizards inexplicably think of dementors. Especially those who had been in Azkaban. The whole person began to tremble all over, as if they had discovered something bad. In an instant, the whole atmosphere suddenly became quiet. At this moment, they remembered that the person who was being scolded was the headmaster of Kamar-Taj, the top wizard who had fought against the Dark Lord Dumbledore. I know everyone is very anxious. Lockhart still maintained the familiar gentle tone. Today I'm here to solve all your worries. As he spoke, he patted the goblin in purple clothes beside him and introduced. Many wizards may not be familiar with this person. He is Harmon, the chief elder of the goblins of Gringotts. After hearing about the incident at Gringotts, we at Kamar-Taj and the Ministry of Magic were also very shocked. To be honest, I believe that many wizards are a little bit unbelievable like us. Given that Gringotts has been keeping wizards' wealth for hundreds of years, this is the first time that such a big mistake has occurred. Kamar-Taj and Hogwarts have joined forces, and the Ministry of Magic and Gringotts will discuss a solution to this matter, so that everyone's interests will not be harmed. Now, let's listen to the statement of the Chief Elder of Gringotts. As soon as Lockhart finished speaking, the wizards below were instantly excited and started to discuss. As the official Ministry of Magic, the long-standing Hogwarts, plus the recent rise in fame, joined forces. Just by listening, this made the credibility go up. Many civilian wizards looked at Lockhart expectantly. As for the so-called goblin elder Harmon, I'm sorry, if it weren't for these damn goblins, why would they be here? Besides, can the compensation bring back all that they lost? They expressed deep doubts about this. To be honest, they could only hope to get back half of their savings. Because even a fool would know that with such a big incident involving the entire wizarding world, who could afford to pay? They only hoped that under the control of Kamar-Taj, Hogwarts, and the Ministry of Magic purebloods would have some face and not go too far. After all kinds of historical experience have told them that purebloods have never had face. Harmon, the former second elder and now the great elder, heard what Lockhart said. Although he had no expression on his face, he did sigh in his heart. Keep. This final word seemed to indicate that the once glorious Gringotts had now completely become a puppet in the hands of wizards. As for himself, a high-level puppet? Harmon thought bitterly, but when he thought of his own life and the lives of many others, as well as the promises made by the other party, Harmon looked at the wizards who were still discussing, and an apology quietly appeared on his originally indifferent face. Then, with an apologetic look on his face, he suddenly bent down and shouted loudly, "I'm sorry, all wizards." This time, the invasion by the Dark Wizards was beyond Gringotts' expectations. For this reason, a total of 1,348 goblins died in Gringotts, and Gringotts was severely damaged. Many important facilities were destroyed. At this point, Harmon's voice trembled a little, his face was full of grief, and his heart was bleeding. The blood-red color of Gringotts' armor reappeared in his mind. Thousands of magic guns and hundreds of the most elite guard goblins were all destroyed. But this is not a reason. This time, Gringotts will bear all the losses of all wizards. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 513 Wizard, saving money can make money. You won't lie to me. Really? Are you kidding us? Are you really going to compensate for everything? Can I get it today? Don't tell me it will be in a year, or after the pureblood families have taken it. It feels weird. Is there some conspiracy? Are there no additional conditions? After hearing the goblin Harmon say that all losses will be borne together, suddenly, the scene became lively, and the wizards started to discuss. It's not that they don't believe it. It's just that the matter itself is a bit too dreamy. The first time they heard that all losses would be borne, they subconsciously felt that there was something wrong. Well, it's an illusion to be cut by leaks. Don't worry, this time Hogwarts, Kamar-Taj, and the Ministry of Magic jointly supervise, and Gringotts will execute. Guarantee that every wizard can get the gold galleons in his hands. Not one less. Lockhart still spoke in a gentle tone, his voice floating in the air, but everyone subconsciously believed it. After all, Lockhart has a very good reputation in the British wizarding world. Vaguely, he is known as the richest man in the entire wizarding world. He alone owns a castle that rivals Hogwarts. No, it should be called a secret space. In Hogwarts, he is known as a rich man. Everyone has gone to line up. I will do the registration first and confirm the amount of wealth that each wizard has in the vault before. You can compare it at that time. If the wealth is missing, please find the registered goblin in time for the final confirmation. Finally, how many gold galleons do you need to withdraw? Just follow the previous process and apply. Even if you are worried, you can withdraw all the gold galleons. Harmon, the current goblin elder of Gringotts, said in a deep voice, with a tone full of affirmative power. As soon as the voice fell, a line of goblins in blue clothes walked out of Gringotts, and they all held a white book in their hands. Facing the wizards, they stood in a row. At the same time, Lockhart waved his wand. The wand shook slightly, and several tables and chairs appeared at the location of the goblins. And above the sky, floating in light blue large words, Registration Office. There was a distance between each goblin, as if to remind the registrants that, as long as they successfully registered, they could enter Gringotts and take out their own cash. At the same time, the nearby auras also stood on both sides, as if they were still maintaining order to avoid registration chaos. At this moment, the power of Kamar-Taj and the Ministry of Magic was demonstrated, but Hogwarts seemed to have revealed nothing. Some wizards were a little confused. However, most wizards didn't even think about it and rushed to the registration office to line up. The sky and the earth are not as big as the gold galleons in their hands. Don't look at the fancy words, but seeing the money is the real thing. Hello, Mr. Honest. This is your registration slip. Enter Gringotts Bank to handle the business in the group with your registration slip. The goblin reminded gently. The voice was neither hurried nor slow, which made people feel a little good. They have received professional training, magic refining, and will not have any thoughts of betraying wizards in the future. Like the family elves, they will only respect wizards. But the only better thing is that the awareness of self-effort is not as thorough as that of house elves. Ronus didn't care about the goblin's attitude. He picked up his registration slip and ran quickly to Gringotts. He would feel relieved if he took out his gold galleons first. Hello, Mr. Honest. According to the records, you have a total of 1,200 gold galleons in the Gringotts vault. 957 of them have been used, and there are 243 remaining. Do you want to withdraw some or all of them? No, take them all out. As soon as the goblin welcoming Gringotts finished welcoming him, Ronus couldn't wait to emphasize that he should take out all of them. The trained goblin would naturally not refuse the wizard's request. However, unlike the previous gold galleons from Gringotts, the goblin in red clothes rang the bell in his hand. The next moment, buzz, a hidden space wave emerged. In the eyes of the goblin and Usrinus, gold galleons appeared on the table in front of them. At the same time, the goblin said gently, please count, a total of 243 gold galleons. After hearing this, Ronus nodded directly, without hesitation, and began to check and count the gold galleons in front of him. When he saw the gold galleons for the first time, hey, what are the patterns on these gold galleons? Ronus pointed to the dark green eye-shaped pattern on the front of the gold galleon and asked in confusion. After hearing this, the goblin said calmly, in view of the sudden counterfeit currency incident in Gringotts, the Ministry of Magic and Kamar-Taj discussed with Gringotts and added anti-counterfeiting marks. Try to avoid necessarily deceiving wizards. The pattern you see belongs to the symbol of Kamar-Taj, named the Eye of Agamotto. The logo of the Ministry of Magic is engraved on the edge of the gold coin with corresponding words. Hearing this, Ronus picked up the gold galleon and looked at the edge of the gold galleon. Sure enough, the name of the Ministry of Magic appeared, as well as a string of complex anti-counterfeiting patterns. At this time, Ronus's doubts were solved. If it was Gringotts who dared to do this, he had no doubt that this was a trick of Gringotts and the cat and cat substitution. But with the Ministry of Magic and Kamar-Taj, he felt relieved and even felt a sense of security. Those who make counterfeit money should all die. He secretly complained in his heart, just as Ronus was about to take away all the gold coins and go home. Suddenly, Mr. Ronus, the cooperation between Kamar-Taj and Gringotts. Gringotts now has a new service. Do you need to know about it? This is the benefit that Principal Lockhart brings to all wizards. Hearing this, Ronus, who was originally about to leave, heard Lockhart's name and immediately asked with interest, what benefit? From today on, goblins who register to withdraw gold galleons will be exempted from all handling fees. And, an interest mechanism is adopted. As long as you deposit money in Gringotts, you will enjoy an interest rate of 5 per year. And you can withdraw cash at any time without affecting normal use. Hearing what the goblin said, the wizard Ronus' eyes suddenly lit up. There is no doubt that, if this is true, it is indeed a very good benefit. But is this true? By storing gold galleons in Gringotts, he can make money on his own. Why does it sound so magical? Well, wizards know very little about banks in the Muggle world, or even nothing at all. Or it can be explained from another perspective. There are many people in the Muggle world and transactions are frequent, so there will be inflation. But wizards have found that gold galleons are still very valuable so far. You can rest assured about this. This rule was jointly formulated by Kamar-Taj, the Ministry of Magic, and Gringotts. As long as you register, you will continue to store your gold galleons in Gringotts. The monthly interest will be automatically credited to your account. Chapter 514, Wizard Fortune Card, Promotion of Dream World. You're not lying to me, are you? Really? Are there a series of conditions, such as I can only keep it with you, and can't take it out, and even have to sign a contract? Ronus held the space extension bag filled with gold galleons tightly in his hand, and questioned the goblin in front of him with a look of disbelief. He was almost about to spit saliva on the other's face. It's not that he couldn't believe it, it was just a bit absurd. This was the first time he heard that you can get money back after depositing money in Gringotts. For thousands of years, every time you deposit money in Gringotts, you need to pay a certain amount of custody fee every year, and the fee will change every year according to the wealth stored. This is how Gringotts makes a profit. At least that's what Ronus thought in his mind. However, after hearing what the goblin said, Ronus had only a huge question in his mind. Are the goblins in Gringotts crazy? How can they make money by doing this? The greedy character of the goblins is simply a fantasy. This is like putting a piece of meat in front of a dog. Only a fool would believe that the dog won't eat it. Facing the wizard Ronus's questioning face, the goblin still maintained a gentle smile and explained, "This is true. It is a policy jointly discussed by Kamar-Taj, the Ministry of Magic, and Gringotts. However, as you said, there are indeed some conditions that the wizard needs to know." Hearing this, Ronus's face showed a look of as expected. Are you kidding? How can there be such a good thing as pie falling from the sky in the world? If it really happens, the pie is probably made of solid iron, the kind that can kill people. The next moment, the goblin's voice made Ronus's eyes widen. My lord wizard, regarding the interest earned from storing currency, there is one thing you need to know clearly. This is time limited, for only 1 year, with an interest rate of 1%. Because there may be a large number of counterfeit coins on the market now, Kamar-Taj, the Ministry of Magic, and Gringotts have discussed recycling gold galleons and other currencies on the market, and screening them to prevent further proliferation of counterfeit coins. As for the interest paid, it is not worth mentioning compared to the harm caused by the proliferation of counterfeit coins. This suggestion was made by Principal Lockhart of Kamar-Taj, and Principal Lockhart is willing to guarantee it for everyone's peace of mind. The Ministry of Magic also agrees with this measure. Then, the goblin reminded him, there is no strict time limit for the gold galleons stored in Gringotts. They can be withdrawn at any time, but the interest will change accordingly. Hearing the goblin's explanation, Ronus suddenly understood. So that's it. This is all for the peace of the wizarding world. Although Ronus vaguely felt that something was wrong, he even suspected that there was another conspiracy. But he waved his wand without hesitation from another space extension bag on his waist, and hundreds of gold galleons he had just earned flew out of it. They formed a golden line, and poured directly into the space extension bag he had just received from the goblin. Then, Ronus handed the remaining space extension bag directly to the goblin opposite, and said generously, I will keep all of these. As a black market merchant selling potions, he was obviously not a fool. If it was a goblin from Gringotts, he would never believe it. But Gringotts, the Ministry of Magic, and Kamar-Taj were together. Especially Principal Lockhart, who was called the richest man in the British wizard world by many wizards. TSK, a person opened a magic school with his own wealth. Just think about it, and you will know how much wealth he has. With such a person guaranteeing, plus the Ministry of Magic, the risk has been suppressed to the lowest. Besides, 1% interest, even if it is only for 1 year, there is still money to be made. It is so cheap, with almost no restrictions and low risk. If he gave up, he would be really stupid. After hearing this, the goblin took the space extension bag, counted it briefly, smiled gently, and said, okay, sir, a total of 3256 gold galleons. The latest information has been registered. At this time, Ronus had time to study the gentle expression of the goblin opposite him. Seeing that the other party had maintained that gentle smile that seemed to have remained unchanged for thousands of years since he came in. For some reason, his body trembled a little, and there was a chilling cold feeling behind his back. He subconsciously thought of a cruel black magic creation, the corpse. Sir, this is your wealth card, please keep it. An exquisite card with a dark black color and a golden dragon pattern engraved on the surface was pushed over the counter by the goblin and placed in front of him. Looking at the card in front of him, Ronus asked in confusion, wealth card? What is this? There were indeed many surprises today, and many of them were a little beyond his imagination. This is the wizard's wealth card created by combining the alchemical items provided by Kamar-Taj with the information from Gringotts. Master Wizard, you can use the wealth card to withdraw the corresponding gold galleons from Gringotts at any time, eliminating those complicated procedures. At the same time, you can also trade gold galleons directly outside through the wealth card. You can immerse your mind in it, issue your orders, and make transactions. Hearing this, Ronus's expression moved, and his left hand subconsciously reached forward to touch the card. His mind naturally flowed into it, sensing the interface that emerged in his mind, a large amount of information, and a series of familiar numbers 3256. It was exactly the exact number of gold galleons he had just deposited in Gringotts. Behind the total funds, there was also an interest rate written, 1%. Behind it was a reminder of the interest income due tomorrow, 43.9 copper nuts. This income, if you save a little, is enough to satisfy your food and drink for a day. When Ronus found this, his excitement was very obvious, and he felt that he really made a lot of money. In addition, Ronus also found that the interface in the wealth card, in addition to not being able to adjust his name, could not be adjusted. Other personal information about oneself can be adjusted appropriately, such as personal profile, height, and weight, etc. However, such a novel alchemical item with special functions is like a primary school student encountering a mobile phone game, which really makes Ronus a little addicted. Hello, Mr. Wizard, your registration has ended. Is there anything else you need? As if noticing that Ronus was addicted to the card operation, the fairy still gently said in advance. Yeah, okay, I know. Ronus came back to his senses and nodded gently to indicate that he knew. Then, holding this wealth card that belongs to him tightly in his hand, he was ready to go out. At this time, the fairy reminded him slowly. Mr. Ronus, I remind you again that the fortune card has a transaction function. You can trade by entering the corresponding payment password or mental pattern. It is recommended that you keep your fortune card safe and do not discard it at will. If there is any problem, please come to Gringotts in time to reissue it or dispose of it. At the same time, the fortune card can only be used in China. It is very likely that normal transactions will not be possible in other countries. Okay, I understand. After hearing the goblin's reminder, Ronus looked at the black card in his hand again. He was about to leave, but he couldn't help asking again, why can it only be used in the UK and not in Europe? As a black market merchant, although his main business place is in the British wizard black market, many of his purchases come from other countries. Otherwise, how can he make money? In response to Ronus' question, the goblin, like a robot puppet, still maintained a gentle smile and explained, hello, Mr. Ronus, the principle behind the fortune card is based on the dream world of Kamar-Taj. And now, the dream world of Kamar-Taj has spread throughout the UK, so the fortune card can be used at any time in the UK. If you want to use the fortune card in other countries, you have to wait patiently for the dream world to spread outward. Hearing this, Ronus' mouth opened a little wide. There are still some who don't quite understand what the dream world is, and what does it mean to have spread throughout the UK. It sounds a little confusing, and even makes him feel uneasy. The dream world is a virtual world studied by Principal Lockhart of Kamar-Taj, and it can also be called a fantasy world. The goblin explained slowly and gently. The specific information about the dream world can be obtained from the wealth card. If there are no other needs, then Mr. Wizard, please leave the position for the next customer to withdraw gold galleons. Hearing this, Ronus frowned, poured in his mental power, and moved slightly, as if touching a key node, and a lot of information about the dream world emerged in his mind. The dream world of Kamar-Taj, created by Principal Gilderoy Lockhart, contains 356 scenes, and 108 types of terrain. Then, at the reminder of the goblin, Ronus walked outside. However, while walking, he did not forget to withdraw his mental power from the wealth card. This thing is too magical, especially the dream world introduced. Just reading the introduction, Ronus' heart surged with an impulse. Later, it was said that the dream world would be initially opened in 3 days, and 500 places would be reserved for entry through the wealth card. All of this made Ronus really feel that the Kamar-Taj founded by Lockhart was beyond the wizard's imagination. In fact, Lockhart or Kamar-Taj has put a lot of thought into this day. Even Peggy Carter, the vice principal, has lost a lot of hair. In fact, this link is too important for Kamar-Taj because it involves wizards entering the new world. When Ronus walked out of the door of Gringotts, his pupils suddenly shrank, and his eyes were fixed on the scene not far away. Damn black wizard, don't try to run this time. I saw several auras and goblins join together to press a middle-aged wizard in a black wizard robe to the ground. The wand on the opponent's waist was even taken out in advance. It can be said that he has completely lost all resistance. And this wizard, Prasko is quite familiar with, is from the pureblood green grass family. Let everyone see the true face of this guy. An aura waved his wand, and in an instant, the clothes on the wizard's arm shattered into pieces, revealing a somewhat old arm, and the intertwined pattern of skulls and snakes. Is it really a dark wizard? The auras actually caught him this time. I thought this bunch of rubbish would always be the last to go on stage, and would always let the prisoners escape. Yes, and look, the mark on his arm is from you-know-who. So, our vault was stolen by you-know-who. Not sure, the Ministry of Magic hasn't given a clear explanation, and there's no movement from you-know-who. Now everyone has proposed a lot of possibilities, but there's no definite answer. After the wizards saw the Death Eaters being caught on the scene, they immediately started discussing. Especially this time it was a pure blood, which really made them feel a little incredible. With the Ministry of Magic's nature, it's not that pure bloods can't be caught, but they always encounter a lot of obstacles every time. To be honest, this time it was too easy. At this time, Ronus, who was not far away, saw with his own eyes that in the crowded crowd, several figures retreated in all directions. If nothing unexpected happened, they were the Death Eaters who robbed this time, the men of the Dark Lord Voldemort. He knew that this group of purebloods would never let go of such a huge benefit. They had already robbed once, and now Gringotts said they would compensate for all the losses. In a matter of seconds, it was equivalent to robbing twice. Only a fool would give up such a huge profit. Ronus thought secretly. At this moment, the auras seemed to have noticed the movement in the crowd, but they did not take any action. All this seemed to have reached a tacit understanding. As long as the pureblood families did not come to make trouble, the auras would not choose to take action directly. Otherwise, if those pureblood families who plundered the vault also wanted to make a fortune again, they would be caught one by one. It just so happened that the Ministry of Magic also needed some criminals to explain and admit their heinous crimes. After all, the matter was so big that the wizards had to give a result. Even if there was a problem, even if it was fake, anger needed to be vented, and this idiot just happened to run into the hands of the Ministry of Magic, Kamar-Taj, and Gringotts. No, to be precise, he was discovered by Lockhart. If he hadn't used this chicken to scare the other monkeys, those pureblood families would have made a fuss long ago. To be honest, if these pureblood families were not useful, Lockhart would have used them as sacrifices long ago. There is no change without bloodshed. And these corrupt purebloods are simply the best sacrifices for the new wizard era. Lockhart stood not far away, looking at everything happening in front of him indifferently. He watched how the 14 left one after another without any action. Instead, he focused his energy on the wizards who came in and out of Gringotts. He sensed that almost every wizard had a magic card specially made by Kamar-Taj. No, it should be called a wizard fortune card. He couldn't help but smile faintly. The magic card refining technology that Wang Xiang Shuka had iterated many times before finally came in handy in the Harry Potter world. This is the fulcrum for prying the entire wizard world. After mastering the right to issue currency, Kamar-Taj will usher in a period of explosion. Gold galleons will be the focus of intervening in various fields of the operation of wizard society. The dream world plays a decisive role. Chapter 515. Voldemort goes mad. Ding, 100 gold galleons have been paid for the transaction. Ding, 100 gold galleons have been received. Cumulative account balance. Voldemort fiddled with the two black wizard wealth cards in his hand, feeling the information that just emerged in his mind. Looking at Tom Riddle standing not far away, his face was a little uncertain. Do you want to give me an explanation? Voldemort said in a gloomy tone, with strong malice in his words. You use me as a gun. Be careful not to hurt yourself. He has already picked up the magic wand in his hand, and it seems that he will start a war if he disagrees with it. He and the other party jointly robbed Gringotts. As a result, the Ministry of Magic, Kamar-Taj and Hogwarts, on the contrary, seemed to have known about it long ago and came up with a very mature response plan, and there was no chaos at all. Especially looking at the two wealth cards in his hand, Voldemort's anger suddenly swelled up. Bang, bang. The black and gold pattern fortune card exploded under the impact of magic. The broken black fragments shot out quickly in all directions, and there were a lot of puncture marks on the vases, blankets, books, bookcases, and even the floor. In an instant, the whole study room was in a mess. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He knew how much effect this thing would have in the future. As long as Kamar-Taj or the Ministry of Magic controlled this thing, as long as the credit did not collapse, it would be equivalent to becoming a super money printing machine without any cost, controlling the lifeblood of the harmless world. Before Gringotts refined gold galleons, it needed to be reported and required a lot of manpower. But now, as many gold galleons as you want. After all, it was just generating data, not real gold galleons. All this was the result of using himself as a gun. He killed so many goblins, but the other party took the biggest advantage. And the timing was so clever that he and his group had just finished it and started hyping it up on the same day, and the other party had already come up with a solution the next day. You said there was no problem here. Do you believe it? Moreover, the other party made perfect use of this incident and thoroughly implemented the so-called wizard wealth card system. The gold galleons were digitized, informationized, and cost-free. What a huge profit behind this. Voldemort couldn't even estimate it at the moment. Because the profit was too huge, he only knew that it was very big, big enough to make him jealous and even lose his mind. It was really too big. How could the Ministry of Magic allow Kamar-Taj to control these? This is equivalent to the real lifeline of the wizarding world. Hogwarts. Dumbledore is eating dry food, allowing Kamar-Taj to promote everything so smoothly. Voldemort thought with great jealousy, and the scarlet light in his eyes became stronger. Even now, when he thought of the huge benefits behind this thing, and thought of missing out on the other party, he was a little crazy. He wished that he could have a fight with Kamar-Taj and Lockhart now. Take away the part he deserved. It was really the more he thought about it, the more heartbroken he became, and the more he thought about it, the more crazy he became. This is the wealth of the entire wizarding world in the past, present, and even the future, all in this small black card. At this moment, his hatred for Tom, Lockhart, and Kamar-Taj far exceeded that of Dumbledore. Do you think Gringotts is so easy to break into? Why do you think Gringotts' resistance is so weak? Why do you think you can get so many magic guns in the armory? Tom's cold voice sounded, and one sentence after another of "you think" made the temperature in the entire study drop again. Suddenly, Tom's indifference and Voldemort's malice intertwined. The two looked at each other, and no one spoke, but they seemed to start touching the wands at their waists, and their momentum began to gradually increase. The chandeliers, vases, and even desks and bookcases in the entire study began to shake, as if they could not bear the pressure at the moment. Finally, bang. Avada Kedavra. Avada Kedavra. Two sharp and rapid voices rang out, and in an instant, two dark green killing curses collided with each other. Suddenly, the raging wave spread rapidly around. Boom. The walls of the entire study were directly broken and rolled outward. Suddenly, a pile of ruins appeared in the center of the huge Malfoy Manor, and a circular flat ground appeared in the center of the ruins. The huge noise attracted the attention of the surrounding Death Eaters and pureblood wizards, and they all ran to the scene of the incident at the first time. However, they stopped after walking a few steps. They clearly felt that the two huge momentums were fighting against each other, and the huge magic fluctuations made them tremble with fear and shudder. Have the masters started a war? A Death Eater in a black robe muttered subconsciously. The word them instantly made their inner pain and entanglement vividly revealed. Pureblood wizards prefer Tom in his youth. That elegant, mysterious, and powerful temperament makes them familiar and fanatical. The dark wizards are quite fanatical about the adult Voldemort. The powerful black magic, the strong desire that is never concealed, and the breath of killing and blood are all over his body. It was simply a stronger version of themselves. Therefore, they were even more fanatical. However, the inner tendency was not enough to make the final judgment when facing the two masters. After all, both of them were masters, although they had their own characteristics and personalities. But they had one thing in common: they would not tolerate the existence of traitors. This was a fact verified by their companions with blood. Boom. 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 The airwaves kept rolling, the ruins were getting bigger and bigger, the dust spread all around, and the smell of death was everywhere. There was no other color on this battlefield. There were only countless dark green life-killing curses colliding continuously, and every collision gave the other party a familiar and strange feeling in their hearts. It was so familiar. This was me. Familiar collision, familiar strength, familiar breath of death. They used the same spell almost at the same time, trying to hit each other's chest. The style of never defending, only attacking and attacking, made the two sides fight more and more fiercely. This was the instinctive combat experience they had formed over the years, which was most suitable for them, and could bring their magic spells to the extreme. Avada Kedavra. Avada Kedavra. No ordinary spells were cast, only the killing curses collided. On the entire battlefield, both sides took strange steps, waving their wands one after another while dodging slowly and quickly. Sharp chanting, green light full of death, and green flames splashing from time to time. If either side accidentally touched, there would be only one way to go, and that was death. The depressing atmosphere of the battle between the two made the surrounding Death Eaters subconsciously hold their breath. Finally, boom. Chapter 516. I need the absolute loyalty of a pure-blooded wizard. Boom. Like a nuclear explosion, a dark green mushroom cloud rose up. Looking at the dazzling green light coming towards them, and the stinging pain in their eyes, they quickly closed their eyes. The expression on their faces was only horror. For pure-blood wizards like Lucius Malfoy, who had experienced betrayal, in addition to horror, there was more fear. With such great strength, they participated in the Battle of Gringotts, and were completely tied to the Dark Lord. I'm afraid they can't get out. After all, they also participated in the robbery of Gringotts. Even if most of the dead were goblins, the loss of wealth in the entire wizarding world was counted on them. They were really tied up. There was fear in the bitter summer, and there was a glimmer of hope in the fear. They followed the Dark Lord's actions. On the one hand, they had to, and on the other hand, there was new hope. Boom. The airwave gradually disappeared, and the dazzling green light began to dim gradually. In the eyes of everyone, the ruins that had originally been after the war disappeared completely, as if they were vaporized, and there was only fine yellow sand on the entire ground. As smooth as silk, the whole thing looks unusually smooth, even revealing a different kind of beauty. And all of this only makes the Death Eaters around feel even more horrible. It's really a terrifying control. The battle was so intense just now, but the final ending was so smooth. Yes, it was smooth. Fight when he said to fight, and retreat when he said to retreat. This is a strong man, they thought with envy. Then restore as before. Tom Riddle gently raised his wand. Suddenly, the thin sand on the ground began to gather in the middle, as if time was flowing backwards, automatically forming black bricks, grey stone pillars, and brown wooden shelves. Even white books and yellow parchment reappeared one after another. In the flying sky, the original house and study reappeared one after another, covering the figures of the two. After seeing it, most of the people around retreated back to where they came from. A few wizards saw it, and immediately understood it, and hurried back to where they lived. The battle between the two masters just now has already shown the seriousness of the conflict. If he went forward at this time, he would be really courting death. Tom, tell me, when did you start the deal with them? What did you get? Voldemort asked coldly. The battle just now had vented all his resentment, anger, and murderous intent. Or to put it another way, it was a battle that was evenly matched, and he was even at a disadvantage. It made him calm down. After all, the two sides originally had a common enemy. If they were fighting internally, separating, or even pushing each other to the enemy's side at this time, they would really be pushing themselves into a dead end. This was true for him, and it was also true for the other party. This was what Voldemort thought in his heart. So, when they finally showed their strength, they ended the battle very tacitly. I told you before that the current situation in Britain is not suitable for us. and I don't intend to be the mortal enemy of Dumbledore and Lockhart forever. Naturally, there will be some form of tacit understanding. Tom said slowly, as if explaining to Voldemort, we want to gain a foothold in Europe in a short period of time, and achieve our goals. We need enough resources, and the more the better. Such a deal, for me, has no loss, but a great gain. Why should I refuse? When he said the word reject, Tom deliberately waved his hand. It seemed to say that, if it were you, you would do the same. In fact, Voldemort thought about it, and found that it was indeed the case. As long as the benefits were sufficient, he would not be stingy to make a move. Although I didn't ask you how much you gained from this operation, I believe you should be very satisfied. Hearing this, Voldemort remained indifferent, and had no expression. Tom didn't care and continued, besides, I personally think that this operation is very effective. We need enough people to go to Europe. Dark wizards need them when they fight, and with the slippery personalities and complicated relationships of purebloods, they must not be missing. After this operation, I believe that group of purebloods should put themselves in the right position. At this point, Tom showed an obvious sneer on his face. Pureblood families are typical fence sitters. How can they be loyal and obedient if you don't put pressure on them? Tell me, what did you get from Kamar-Taj? Voldemort emphasized again. He understood what they said before, and even understood it. But the two people are the same person, and their thoughts can be guessed almost exactly. With Kamar-Taj's actions, his personality will not help for no reason. Without benefits, even big benefits, it is definitely difficult to do it. Then a dark green ball of light appeared in Tom's hand. Feeling the majestic mental power and illusory breath contained in the light ball, Voldemort narrowed his eyes slightly. This is the so-called Dream World Seed. Lockhart gave this thing to you? His words revealed a strong distrust. Although he didn't know how useful the Dream World was, he knew that the entire wizard wealth card system was based on the Dream World. You can imagine the importance of the Dream World. Generally speaking, such important things are rarely obtained. Even as a lifeline, it is not enough to cover it up. How could it be given away? The main reason was that it was beyond Voldemort's imagination. Don't worry, the value of the Dream World Seed is not as great as you think. The important thing is to collect enough high quality mental power to cultivate the dream world later. After the voice fell, Tom casually threw a dark green seed that looked like jade and slowly fell in front of Voldemort. This is another Dream World Seed. If you are interested, you can study and use it, Tom explained calmly. After hearing this, Voldemort squinted his eyes and said nothing. He reached out and grabbed it and put his mental power into this dream seed that looked like jade. He wanted to see what the so-called dream world was. How much does it have to do with dreams? How to support the operation of the wealth card system? Well, to be honest, Voldemort still feels the pain, and he still thinks about the wealth card system. To put it bluntly, when he sees others making money, he feels that he has lost money. He also wants to replicate it. As soon as his mental power probed into the dream seed, a conspicuous obstacle surged into his mind. Voldemort did not have any surprises, but increased the infusion of mental power, and at the same time, gathered magic power into it. At this moment, Tom's voice made Voldemort's heart warm. Lockhart and I have reached an agreement that the wizard wealth card system can also be promoted in Europe by us. Chapter 517, The Pureblood Family's Choice. Dobby, pack this vase for me, be careful not to break it. Dobby, clean this furniture for me, keep it well, don't let it get dusty. Okay, master, Dobby will definitely clean it. Dobby, give it to me. Narcissa Malfoy stood in the room and kept giving orders, and the house elf Dobby quickly responded and stepped up his work. From time to time, he waved his wand to control some precious magic books and magic items to fall into the opened magic suitcase on the ground in front of him. Just let the house elves sort out the general things. It's better not to let the house elves touch the precious items. To avoid contamination, Lucius Malfoy on the side looked at everything in front of him indifferently. He had no expression on his face, but he couldn't hide his loneliness and nostalgia. He was leaving. He was going to another continent, another country, and start another life. In the days to come, fighting and killing were inevitable. Chaos will be the norm. Killing will be a daily routine. The peaceful life has been disrupted, but the life to come will only be more intense and more chaotic. He could not refuse these, nor did he dare to refuse. His manor was now the headquarters of the Death Eaters. His master chose to live here, which was his honor, and also a punishment for him. As a pure-blooded Death Eater with the Death Eater mark on his arm, he had no right to refuse. Moreover, he also had the opportunity to plunder Gringotts. He had wanted to refuse, but if he did not join this plunder, the Malfoy family's vault would probably become a trophy. Huge interests and current threats. This action has become a must. Since it has been done, there is a price to pay. Tied to a boat, there is only one way to go until death. They have no ability to refuse, at least they must leave. After all, after plundering Gringotts, there is no room for them to survive in the entire British wizarding world. Behind the huge interests, there are naturally huge dangers. Leaving Britain and following the master, this is their only way to survive. Of course, this behavior can also be regarded as a token of surrender. Their master, the Dark Lord Voldemort, gave them two choices: betrayal or loyalty. They had to make a choice. So there is today. Lucius, what about Draco? Should we let him stay in Hogwarts? Those worriedly said, if we leave, no one will take care of Draco. I'm worried about him. This is the best choice. Lucius interrupted his wife's words and said heavily, although the master didn't tell us which country our target is. But there is no doubt that our next environment is definitely not suitable for Draco's growth. When the master leaves, Hogwarts will only be safer. Besides, this is the root of the Malfoy family. We can't abandon it. We have to go, but I will leave Dobby to Draco to take care of the Malfoy family. Lucius told his wife his thoughts. After hearing this, Narcissa hesitated for a long time and finally nodded in agreement. She knew that this was the best way. They would do the dangerous things, and her son would stay in a safe place. She was just worried that the child would not be accompanied by them. Narcissa, the Malfoy family genealogy should still be left behind to Draco. Then, Lucius mentioned it as if chatting. After hearing this, Narcissa was a little stunned. Finally, she pursed her lips and nodded heavily. She knew what her husband meant. If they died in this battle, at least Draco's lineage was still alive and someone remembered them. The Malfoy family was not really exterminated at this moment, but, feeling a slight burning sensation on his arm, Lucius Malfoy's expression changed slightly. He subconsciously lowered his head to look at the slowly moving dark green Death Eater mark. The dark green light was slowly jumping, as if conveying some kind of information. Lucius took a deep breath and said to his wife in a deep voice, Narcissa, although I want you to stay and continue to accompany Draco, but reality is still reality. The master's request is difficult for the current pureblood family to refuse. I hope you won't blame me in the future. Hurry up and pack up and get ready to go. The Irish Sea, the location of the fourth Horcrux, the cliff by the sea. On the edge of the cliff, there is a very huge, dark black gate with powerful energy fluctuations. Tom and Voldemort turned their backs to the gate and stared at the dark wizards, purebloods, and wizards opposite. They all carried space suitcases in their hands, and some even had multiple space extension bags on their waists. Some looked hopeful, some were slightly uneasy, and some kept fiddling with their wands, very excited. Some pureblood wizards looked at the magic suitcases in their hands from time to time. Their families, sons, servants, and goblins were all inside. It can be said that this time they really brought their families with them. They dare not say that they moved all the family heritage here, but at least they brought most of it. For them, this is a gamble. However, given the existence of the two masters, the probability of winning this gamble is even better. Therefore, some of the pureblood wizards who are optimistic about them chose to fight hard with their family heritage. Don't doubt them, some purebloods are still very gambling. Otherwise, they would not have supported the Dark Lord before. Others still continue the style of being fence sitters before. Take a part for yourself, and leave a part for the family. In any case, the family heritage will not be destroyed in one go. Of course, Voldemort is extremely unfortunate for such behavior. If it weren't for Tom's obstruction, I'm afraid he would have taught them a profound lesson. Such a big thing, and you still want to cheat with him. Is this because his reputation as the Dark Lord does not exist? As for the complaints, resentment, and betrayal that will arise from this. Voldemort doesn't care. Is this because his wand is not sharp? He never talks about human relationships when doing things. He can step into this position purely because his stick is powerful enough and his knife is sharp enough. Of course, bread has also become very abundant. The reason why Tom stopped him was that he still needed the cooperation of the pureblood later, so don't push too hard. But in fact, damn Lockhart, this is for the inheritance of the pureblood family, so that it will not be completely taken away. Let him not push too hard. Leave the pureblood family with a chance to inherit. At that time, as long as we find a suitable opportunity, the treasures and inherited knowledge of these pureblood families will fall into the hands of Kamar-Taj. Tom cursed fiercely in his heart, not worrying about being detected by the contract signed before. He is not stupid, and these few months have passed. Although the magic contract in his mind cannot be destroyed, it can be avoided to a certain extent. However, when Tom recalled that Lockhart appeared in front of him in the form of a flaming skeleton, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Everyone, let's not waste any more time talking nonsense. Our target today is Durmstrang. Chapter 518, Voldemort's arriving in Europe. Durmstrang in the north of Norway. As the northernmost place in Europe, Durmstrang has been in a cold state for a long time. Even in summer, young wizards have to wear wizard robes that cover their whole body. Of course, some senior wizards can be fearless of the cold with magic such as warming spells. Or some junior pureblood wizards will also use wizard robes with spells to resist the cold wind. In fact, many years ago, many people from pureblood families proposed to set up a large-scale warming spell near Durmstrang. Make Durmstrang like spring all year round. However, it was directly rejected by the then principal Halfling. She believed, suffering creates glory. These cold winds are just a small tempering. If you can't even bear this little pain, how can you achieve great things in the future? Hearing these reasons, those pureblood parents never proposed again. After all, their children all go to school here. They originally wanted their children to become better, not to become a waste. Moreover, Principal Halfling's prestige at the time was also very strong. It was comparable to Dumbledore. The dueling and martial arts magic courses she established are still in progress and are impressive. This is also the root of Durmstrang's reputation for teaching dark magic. At this moment, Igor Karkaroff, the headmaster of Durmstrang, was staying in his study and taking a nap. As a mascot, he knew deeply that, as long as he did nothing, it would be the best choice. Especially Lord Grindelwald promised him not to make trouble during this period of term. Then he could help him remove the Death Eater mark and protect him. So, he was very sensible. Since knowing Grindelwald and the Saints organization, he did not want to make a big fuss in Europe. He just wanted to replace it imperceptibly. So, he cooperated very well, and treated himself like a pig. He ate and slept all day long, slept and ate, and was bored, so he just read magic books. He basically didn't even go out of the headmaster's office. He had no requirements for the appointment of professors. He would sign, as long as the list was handed over. It can be said that he completely regarded himself as a decoration to stabilize people's hearts, especially the hearts of the people in the Ministry of Magic of European countries. Otherwise, if they knew that Grindelwald had no scruples and directly replaced the principal of a school, the probability of the magic ministries of these countries uniting would increase sharply. For Grindelwald, that would be a real trouble. Who? A faint sound of deep sleep sounded, as if Karkaroff had fallen asleep. At this moment, his inner sense of security was very sufficient, and he was not anxious at all after knowing that his former master had resurrected. Really, he completely lived like a pig, which might be his wisdom. He was also very grateful for Grindelwald's promise, and his former master was not a problem for him now. After all, no matter what, the Dark Lord would not be an enemy of Grindelwald just because he was a wizard, right? This is like seeing a cockroach and destroying the house. Impossible and unrealistic. So Karkaroff fell asleep very peacefully. However, the Death Eater mark of the skull and snake intertwined began to slowly wander on his arm. A faint dark green light appeared on his arm, as if conveying some kind of information. The next moment, buzz. The space in the principal's office began to ripple like the surface of water. The ocean, blue sky, and cliffs were vaguely revealed. Of course, a large number of dark wizards also appeared, and they were lined up like an army. A pale arm passed through the space-like ripples on the water, and walked straight into the principal's office of Durmstrang. The next moment, Voldemort, wearing a black wizard robe, and showing pale skin, had crossed the ocean, and arrived at another continent. The air around seemed to become a little cold. Karkaroff, who was in a dream, shuddered. Then he felt a cold object poking his face. Even if he was sleeping in a dream, he felt a little uncomfortable. So he began to struggle and wake up, and then Master looked at the scholar eyes in front of him, and the familiar and cold pale face. Karkaroff said in a trembling voice. He felt dizzy now, as if he was dreaming, and couldn't believe it. He once reported all the Death Eaters. Even Barty Claw, the most trusted and loyal member of the Dark Lord, was reported by him. It can be said that he really offended the Death Eaters. This is why he ran from England to Europe. He really couldn't make it. Many pure-blooded Death Eaters who escaped the catastrophe wanted to teach him a profound lesson, and even took their heads and sacrificed their dead comrades. Karkaroff, it seems that you have lived a good life in recent years. Hearing the cold voice of the Master, Karkaroff was so scared that the wand he had just grabbed loosened his hand and fell to the ground. Master Karkaroff tried desperately to explain, but when the word came to his lips, he couldn't utter a word. He was now full of despair, wishing that Grindelwald would appear at that time to relieve him from the danger he was facing. Trample, trample, trample. Following Voldemort's figure, he crossed half of the earth and arrived at Durmstrang. Tom Riddle, also wearing a dark green wizard robe, came to the headmaster's office of Durmstrang. Behind him, Barty Crouch Jr., Bella and other Death Eaters slowly came in. For a moment, the originally spacious headmaster's office began to become a little narrow. Master, let me teach this dead fat pig a lesson. Barty Crouch Jr. walked up to Voldemort and said respectfully. He looked at Karkaroff with malice. If this guy hadn't betrayed him, how could he have been caught? Voldemort was interested in Barty Crouch Jr.'s deep desire and resentment. He nodded gently, without saying a word, and took a step back, as if handing the scene over to Barty Crouch Jr. Then Crucio. AHH. The bloody curse hit Karkaroff's body directly. Only a violent scream was heard, spreading throughout the room. Karkaroff was trembling all over, his face turned pale, sweat was all over the floor, and his body was twisting like a maggot on the floor. Hearing the screams in his ears, Barty Crouch Jr.'s face was full of satisfaction. Tom, who was standing by, looked at the wand and waved it casually to block the transmission of the sound, but he didn't care. He was now trying to sense the status of the entire Durmstrang through the principal's office. This is the first step to descend on Europe and become the king. Seize Durmstrang. Chapter 519. The Day Durmstrang Falls. Durmstrang, the vice principal's office. Veritaserum, who is called the vice principal, but actually controls the entire Durmstrang, sits at the table. She taps the table lightly with a feather pen in her right hand. Looking at the parchment in front of her, she frowns, as if she has encountered some problems. Is the expedition to the United States so expensive? The gap with the original estimate is too big. As the rear base of the expedition to the United States, they have made sufficient preparations. In order to prevent accidents, she has even increased the budget by about 30%. In theory, there should be no problem. In fact, the plan has been completed by 99%, and the Magic Congress has fallen. They can almost be said to have succeeded. As a result, a Goblin King popped out from nowhere. He actually supported the Magic Congress, and more importantly, the weapons he took out made up for the lack of combat power at the bottom of the Magic Congress of the United States. And the other party even has weapons that can resist the power of the leader's destiny. In the end, it has been entangled until now. Did the leader make the wrong choice? As soon as the thought came to mind, Veritaserum threw it out of her mind. The great leader Grindelwald cannot be wrong. It's just that they didn't do it well in the details. That's right. Why didn't anyone report such important intelligence about the goblins? Is Harlem, who is in charge of intelligence, just a freeloader? At this moment, she was extremely disappointed with Harlem, a pure-blood wizard. He didn't know anything before the incident and only investigated after it happened. He was a typical person who was just sitting there doing nothing. When she thought of this, Rosier couldn't help but feel a little angry. This bastard really deserved to die for causing such a big loss to them. With his mind turning, Rosier put aside his thoughts and continued to plan how to wipe out the goblins in Europe. When the United States found traces of goblins intervening in the plan, the intelligence system of the Saints began to operate quickly. After searching for all the abnormal activities of goblins in the past 100 years, they finally found the information about Turin, the king of goblins. Although Turin, the king of goblins, didn't know his real name, he once became a famous alchemist in Europe under the name of Glass. He had close contacts and cooperation with many powerful wizards, including several ministries of magic. There are also rumors that Glass or Turin does not rely on all chemical items, and his own strength is extremely strong. However, no wizard believes it. At most, they think that Turin defeated the enemy by refining all chemical items himself. This is normal. As a top alchemist, as long as he prepares in advance, the combat power he can exert is enough to reach a very high level. But for some reason, according to intelligence, the other party is obviously a goblin. But the relationship with the goblin does not seem to be close, and there are even some contradictions. At that time, this was also a reason why many wizards in the Ministry of Magic were friendly with Turin. But now it seems that everything is an illusion. The other party may have collected the goblins in Europe a long time ago, and the truth that he suddenly disappeared and was even mistaken for death was revealed. He ran to the United States, established the American Wizard Bank, and intervened in the Magic Congress. Thinking of this, Rosier couldn't help but sigh. The other party is really too sensitive. If it was 40 or 50 years ago, then the Saints might have found traces of Turin. But the other party has been cleaning up its own traces over the years, and even consciously mobilized the elite forces of the goblins to leave Europe and go to the United States. As a result, until now, although they know that the goblins have caused them a lot of trouble, however, they can't find too much important information related to Turin. And the goblins in Europe, who occupy key positions, are basically nowhere to be found, and they have long been transferred. Most of the ones left are ordinary goblins, and many of them are still serving the local Ministry of Magic. If the Saints are not ready to turn against all the magic tribes in Europe, then it is impossible to target these ordinary goblins. Besides, what's the point of catching more ordinary goblins? Treasures can't be found, and key goblins can't be caught, and useful information can't be obtained. This goblin Turin is really a slippery catfish. Rosier felt a little headache. After thinking about it, he waved the feather pen in his hand and wrote slowly, "Mobilize 10,000 gold galleons for supplies and 3,000 bottles of healing potion." Rosier wrote slowly, sometimes pausing, as if thinking, considering, and sometimes erasing the previous handwriting. Shap, shap, shap. There was a rustling sound of writing in the vice principal's office. There was a new list on the parchment, which was getting longer and longer, and Rosier wrote slower and slower. Suddenly, the quill stopped, the rustling sound of writing disappeared, and there was silence all around. This silence came a little abruptly. The sound of the cold wind outside, and the faint sounds of the little wizards playing outside the office all disappeared. At this moment, Rosier became alert, and the quill in her hand gradually turned into a brown wand in her hand. Except for the appearance of the wand in her hand, she did not take any action, not even moving. It was not that she was unwilling to move, but she clearly felt that a strong malice was wrapping herself fiercely. The breath of death had never been so strong. It seemed that, as long as she moved slightly, the next moment, there would be only one result, death. However, although feeling good in his heart, and his inner ferocity was also aroused, following the great leader Grindelwald, how could he be powerless? The next moment, boom. The desk in front of him, and the chair he sat on exploded into pieces, shooting in all directions. The blue fierce fire spread outward at a lightning speed, burning everything in front of it. At the same time, black light flickered, and the phantom was quietly activated. Strangely, it was not Rosier's figure that disappeared, but the wand in her hand. Damn, the news leaked. Voldemort's cold voice sounded. The next moment, thin black ropes emerged from the air, tying Rosier from head to toe, unable to struggle. It won't have much impact. Even if the news doesn't leak today, it will soon reach Grindelwald's ears. Tom's gentle and elegant voice sounded. In Rosier's eyes, a young man wearing an exquisite dark green wizard robe appeared in front of him. Oh no, the enemy turned out to be the two Voldemorts from Britain. Rosier looked at the two wizards on the left and right in front of him. One had pale skin and scowled eyes that revealed a strong malice. The other was young and elegant, with a gentle smile, but exuded a mysterious dark aura. The corresponding identity information quickly emerged in his mind. Rosier was horrified and puzzled. Why did they come to Europe, to Durmstrang? However, when he thought of the message sent from his wand, the fear in his heart slowly disappeared. Then he looked at the two people in front of him coldly. If he was caught, it meant that Durmstrang had fallen. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 520 Grindelwald, All the Elite Saints, Follow Me. Alvermorny, the United States, the headmaster's office. There is a yellow parchment on the desk. Grindelwald sat at his desk, waving his quill pen to make constant revisions. Sometimes he was in deep thought, as if thinking, and sometimes he suddenly realized something, and quickly wrote down what he was thinking. As the quill pen waved, lines of elegant handwriting continued to emerge. However, what was magical was that no matter how much Grindelwald wrote, the parchment seemed endless. The font had moved up unconsciously, and 1/3 was always left blank. Obviously, Grindelwald was very familiar with this. After all, this was a magic item he had made to record research results, and he had added all the functions he could think of. It was just a simple font movement, leaving space. What he liked most was that this magic record had the function of automatic deduction. Some magic experiments, including the calculation of some data, can be automatically deduced to give results with a high degree of reliability. It can even automatically deduce some ideas and recognize the probability of success. Because the power of fate is involved here, this is his favorite feature, which saves him a lot of time. At this moment, he is writing down some of his thoughts and research results on meditation and joint casting. After repeated experiments and many actual combats, he has to admit that meditation combined with joint casting can indeed change the direction of future wars. The only disadvantage is that the spirituality of the spirit is easily suppressed. This does not have much impact on ordinary wizards. But if you really want to step into the top, every wizard has his own characteristics. For example, his fate, Dumbledore's rebirth, and Voldemort's death. After these souls are transformed, they are born naturally according to their own spirituality. After practicing meditation, you will feel mental power, and your own spirituality will be suppressed and transformed into the unique attributes of meditation. Of course, if the soul is transformed, it can naturally make up for it. This is obviously more costly. However, this will not affect ordinary wizards. On the contrary, after the mental power is transformed, it is easier to resonate with magic. Grindelwald waved his hand and recorded his latest thinking results on parchment. After a moment of hesitation, a solution seemed to come to mind. Although the process was a bit complicated, it might be effective and could be considered a solution. So he wrote again. However, bang, 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 there was a crisp knocking sound from the window. The pet eagle Nubby knocked on the window regularly with its long eagle beak. This made Grindelwald look gloomy. He was not angry because Nubby knocked on the window to disturb him. He was angry because of the brown wooden wand that Nubby was holding under his feet. It was the portable wand of his confidant Vida Rosier. Whoosh! With a wave of his hand, the glass window quietly opened. Nubby quickly flapped his wings and landed in front of Grindelwald. He placed the wand in his hand in front of him and then flew to the shelf beside him. He tilted his head and watched the scene in front of him. He was very smart. He had seen this wand countless times. Although every time he met, he was brought by the old woman. But this time the old woman disappeared, and the wand flew in front of him. He could feel the anger and despair wrapped around the wand. Tell him directly that something bad has happened, and he should find his master. Sure enough, Grindelwald. He placed his hand on the surface of the wand and gently stroked it. The pupil of his left eye quietly turned silver white. Pictures appeared quietly. Grindelwald's face was gloomy and his eyes were cold. The temperature of the whole room suddenly dropped several degrees, as if to show his inner anger. The rosier wand in his hand seemed to sense some kind of information and beat slightly, as if to agree with Grindelwald's thoughts at this time. At this moment, dang, dang, dang. There was a knock on the door, and Grindelwald said a short enter. The middle-aged wizard Halm walked in. He seemed to notice that the atmosphere was a little wrong. After observing the leader's expression, he immediately became restrained and cautious. Oops, who made the leader angry? I'm so unlucky that I jumped in at this time. However, this news is indeed very important and must be reported in person. Leader, there is a piece of news that you ordered me to pay personal attention to. Halm's expression straightened. He bent down slightly and said in a deep voice, "Speak." The short voice and cold tone made Halm feel something was wrong. He quickly lowered his head and said in a very solemn tone, "Master, there are the latest changes in the news you ordered about Dumbledore, Lockhart and the Dark Lord Voldemort. Dumbledore is suspected to have met with the Goblin King Turin to discuss the next cooperation. Gringotts in the British wizarding world was looted, and a huge change occurred. According to reliable intelligence, the Black Hands who looted Gringotts are probably the two Dark Lords Voldemort. And when Gringotts was looted, the Ministry of Magic, Hogwarts, and Kamar-Taj joined forces to quickly suppress the matter and promote the wizard wealth card system." As he said this, Halm held two black wizard wealth cards in his hands, walked to the table, put them down quickly, and returned to his original position. After hearing this, Grindelwald picked up the two fortune cards expressionlessly and continued to look at his confidant, Halm, who was in charge of the intelligence system. To be honest, he was a little disappointed. Although he knew that this could not be blamed on Halm, after all, it involved the top power of the wizarding world. But the other party did not find any traces, which really made people doubt whether he was incompetent. Halm seemed to feel the leader's gaze, and without hesitation, he continued to speak. "According to our analysis, the magic Kamar-Taj and Hogwarts reaction speed are really fast and a little weird. The Dark Lord made the Death Eaters just finished, and they solved all the impacts right after, and promoted the fortune card system very smoothly. Either they have cooperated with the Dark Lord, or they're ranged undercover Death Eaters to infiltrate the Dark Lord." At this point, Halm hesitated a little, as if judging whether he should speak out his thoughts. After hesitating for a moment, Halm continued, "We personally speculate that they arranged an undercover agent in the second part. With Lockhart's research ability, it is very likely that he has developed the ability to block the Death Eater's mark and successfully let the undercover agent bring back information. Just like us." Hearing this, Grindelwald was still fiddling with the two black fortune cards in his hand, as if these two fortune cards had aroused his great interest. Halm secretly watched the leader's right eye turn silver again. If nothing unexpected happened, I'm afraid the leader has peeked into the future through the Eye of Destiny again. Anything else? Suddenly, Grindelwald asked briefly. This made Halm a little puzzled. The important information should be gone, and everything that should be said has been said. Besides, with the leader's talent for peeking into the future, to be honest, their intelligence department is not as important as imagined. But since the leader has spoken, he naturally can't shut up. After careful thinking, he picked a piece of uncertain news that has not been verified in detail, and said it tentatively. "Leader, there is another piece of news, but it is just a rumor. It is said that after this robbery, the Dark Lord and his Death Eaters disappeared, and it seems that no trace has been revealed so far." As he said that, he gave his own guess. Maybe they are digesting the results somewhere. Of course, it is also possible to avoid being tracked by Kamar-Taj and the Ministry of Magic. After all, this incident is really a big deal. After saying that, Halm continued to remain silent. Then a cold voice came into Halm's ears. "I know where they are. Now, call all the elite saints who can act, and follow me." Chapter 521. Voldemort's first meeting with Grindelwald. Durmstrang, detention room. Let me go quickly. Damned Death Eaters, when the leader comes back, none of you can escape. I'm from the Saints. This detention room, which was originally used to lock up young wizards, is now filled with professors and staff of this school. They probably never thought that the place that was once used to punish students would now be used to lock themselves up. Most of the bound saint wizards started to curse and shout. They directly asked about the parents and bloodline of the 2 wizards guarding the door. This made the 2 pure-blooded wizards outside very unhappy. But due to the master's previous order, they just had a cold face and said nothing. If possible, he would definitely let the other party enjoy what it means to have cramps and bones pulled out, what it means to be in excruciating pain, and what it means that death is heaven. In the detention room full of curses, there was no sound from a corner near the left. Because there was no one here. To be precise, there was only one woman. She looked a bit old, with some wrinkles on her face. She was wearing a dark blue wizard robe, with her eyes closed, and an indifferent look on her face. The wizards around her glanced at her from time to time, but quickly retracted their glances, as if they were afraid of this woman. Then, they cursed the wizards outside even louder. Not only did they show their anger, but they also expressed their position. They had nothing to do with this group of Death Eaters. Although everyone knew that this group of Death Eaters could capture Durmstrang so smoothly, there must be an undercover agent. More importantly, with the leader's prophetic ability, he didn't notice it at all. Either he would take advantage of the situation, or the consequences would be even more terrifying. Lord Rosier, what should we do now? A middle-aged wizard with his hands and feet tied moved slowly and whispered. At this moment, this somewhat old woman was the backbone of the entire cell. She had followed the leader for more than half a century, and was Grindelwald's most trusted confidant. No need to do anything, just wait. Rosier opened his eyes, said briefly, and then closed his eyes again, as if he had already made up his mind. The wizards beside him were a little disappointed after hearing this, but they didn't say much. Up to now, although they have confidence in their leader. But they also know that this time the enemy is not as simple as imagined. Behind the Death Eaters is another Dark Lord, Voldemort, who once ravaged the British wizarding world and fought against Dumbledore. What's more troublesome is that according to their intelligence, they naturally know that there seem to be 2 more this time. They have to feel a certain degree of anxiety. At this moment, Vida Rosier's heart is calm. She has sent the information to the adults through the wand in her hand, and has done everything she can. The rest depends on the decision of the leader. Now, she knows that Lord Grindelwald is fighting against Dumbledore and the Goblin King in America. Can he come back and retake Durmstrang? She is not sure. What she is most worried about now is why Lord Grindelwald did not discover this sneak attack. This gave rise to a guess. Could this be another trap? A trap that used them as bait? After all, the last person who covered up fate was Chiron, the king of the goblins. It had a great impact on the Saints. Now that the 2 sides are hostile, it is hard not to think of this. If the king of the goblins joins forces with Voldemort, then such guesses emerged a lot in Rosier's mind, but they were overturned one by one, and she was not sure. In the end, everything turned into a heavy sigh in her heart. She did everything she could, and the rest depended on the adults. The worst result, if it was really a bait, then she would never be a burden to the adults. Closing her eyes and thinking, Rosier kept deducing the possible results amid the curses of the Saints. I don't know how long it took. Suddenly, the curses in my ears suddenly disappeared, and everything was silent. For some reason, a cold feeling suddenly surged into my heart. Rosier opened his eyes and stared at the 2 figures in front of him. It seemed that he had known who the visitors were, without any expression. Vida Rosier, 93 years old, studied at Durmstrang, met Getter Grindelwald at the age of 19, and was once hostile to him. The pale-faced Voldemort spoke softly as if chatting. The wizards around him fell silent early after hearing this, and even shrank back. They were considered the middle power of the Saints, and could clearly feel the deadly threat that was like death. That was a power comparable to that of the leader, and there were 2 at a time, so they could not help but be frightened. After hearing this, Rosier closed his eyes without any expression. Voldemort saw this without any anger, but continued, at the age of 23, I was influenced by Grindelwald to join the Saints. I once encountered 16 life and death crises, among which I blocked at least 12 for Grindelwald. At this point, Tom Riddle smiled faintly and said in an evil voice, "So, Grindelwald should be considered to trust you very much. Tell me, if you attack him in your identity, can he survive?" Voldemort's cold and evil voice had just fallen, and Rachel's eyes widened, glaring, full of anger, and finally turned into a cold word. "Voldemort, your conspiracy will never succeed." As soon as the voice fell, it was visible to the naked eye that Rachel's 7 orifices began to bleed, and light red marks began to appear on various parts of her body. The restless energy seemed to indicate that something very bad was going to happen. Magic riot, self-destruction. As early as when she followed Grindelwald, she had already expected such a situation to occur. She said she would not be a burden to the adults, so she would never allow herself to be used as bait. Again, she would do her best work, and the rest would depend on the adults. She would use her death to leave the last message for Lord Grindelwald. Even if the other party had the means to cover up their fate, even if the other party might use the Polyjuice potion, she would never allow herself to become a burden. After hearing this, many wizards on the side covered their ears. They were not fools. Could they know about this plan? If it was true, Rosier would not die first, so they must die first to prevent the news from leaking. Enough. Tom Riddle waved his wand quickly, and a large number of dark purple vines with thorns quickly appeared on the black floor. The dark purple thorny vines quickly wrapped around Vida Rosier in front of him, constantly absorbing the violent magic in Rosier's body. It was visible to the naked eye that the originally dark purple vine branches were constantly flowing with red flame lines and veins, and the originally chaotic and restless breath of Rosier gradually calmed down. Feeling that her spell seemed to be dissolved, Rosier's eyes showed a very complicated look. Of course, she didn't want to die, but she was not afraid of death, and she didn't want to be a burden. And now, her last resort was also broken. This means Rosier is useful. Tom Riddle's Voldemort said coldly, "You force her to death, and we will all pay the price." After hearing this, Voldemort shrugged his shoulders with a look of disdain on his face. Die or die. After the Gringotts incident, especially after coming to Europe this time, he felt something was wrong. He seemed to have fallen into an unknown big net. All actions were being restrained. He needed to break through this big net quickly, even if it cost a lot. Grindelwald is a good choice. Let's go. Your master is here. We have to let him see what his loyal confidant has done for him, don't we? Without replying to Tom Riddle's words, Voldemort made a few sarcastic remarks. He waved his wand and flew out of the detention room with Rosier, who was covered in blood, and walked towards the outside of Durmstrang. At this moment, the passage outside the detention room was already filled with a large number of Death Eaters. Some of them were excited, some were nervous, and some were slightly afraid. Grindelwald came. He brought a large number of elite saints to the outside of Durmstrang. At this time, they could only rely on their master. They knew about the prisoners in the detention room early. Since their master ordered them not to take action, they naturally did not dare to move. At this moment, when Voldemort walked out slowly, Rosier, who was covered in blood, floated behind him. All the Death Eaters stood at the edge of the wall, leaving a wide passage for their master. Step, 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 tick, tick. Voldemort stepped on his boots and walked outside. Rachel floated in the air, and blood dripped on the ground. A long blood stain appeared. Seeing this miserable scene, all the Death Eaters were shocked. They didn't know that this was Tom Riddle's move to ease Rosier's self-destruction. But they knew that their master Voldemort could do anything. Especially this kind of torture of prisoners. It was too common. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Outside Durmstrang, in the ice and snow, the cold wind whistled and blew against the huge building. Grindelwald, wearing a black robe, stood at the door of Durmstrang, with a dense crowd of saints standing behind him. The queue was neat, and seemed to have a special power. At this moment, Grindelwald's heart was filled with anger. He wanted to attack Durmstrang directly, find out the mastermind behind the scenes, and tear him into pieces. But he was also very calm in his heart. His sense of fate failed again. He had to wonder if the other party had set a trap long ago and was waiting for him. Now, the once mysterious fate seems to be repeatedly blocked. His actions have encountered various accidents. The Magic Congress, which had been successfully conquered, suddenly saw the emergence of the Goblin King. Durmstrang, the base camp that had long been impregnable, was also conquered. Dumbledore suddenly came to the United States. Lockhart and the Ministry of Magic jointly issued the so-called Wizard Wealth Card. The world is constantly changing, and he can clearly sense it. But unfortunately, he did not enjoy the dividends, but his plans were interrupted again and again. This made him a little anxious in his heart. Is this world gradually rejecting old people like him? The fall of Durmstrang this time sounded the alarm for him. His originally good situation was all clouds and illusions. He needed to repeatedly consolidate his foundation. At this moment, he had a vague answer in his heart about what to do next. At this moment, click, 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 the door of Durmstrang quietly opened, and the two Voldemorts brought a group of Death Eaters and walked out, staring at the saints opposite. This moment was the first time that the two generations of Dark Lords looked at each other. The atmosphere at this moment was extremely depressing, especially when Grindelwald saw Rosier covered in blood. The cold, murderous intent of death rushed out crazily, aiming directly at Voldemort and Tom. The black pupil of his left eye quietly turned silver white, and the majestic power of destiny responded and began to surge. Provocation. Naked provocation. After Voldemort and Tom on the opposite side sensed Grindelwald's strong hostility, Voldemort smiled cruelly, raised his wand gently, and Rosier's figure swayed, and blood kept dripping in the snow. Red plum blossoms were dyed on the snow-white ground. It seemed like a provocation. Tom looked at Grindelwald on the opposite side and smiled slightly. At this moment, both sides were silent, and no one seemed to speak. But the surging magic seemed to have said everything that should be said. Whoosh! Tom waved the U-wand in his hand, and Rachel's body slowly floated forward and flew towards Grindelwald. Seeing this, Voldemort showed a disdainful smile on his face, but did not stop it. Grindelwald, your men are very brave. Tom commented as if praising. They commit suicide when they disagree with each other. I like it. However, a gentleman does not take away what others love. I leave it to you. Tom controlled Rosier to fly slowly in front of Grindelwald, as if to express his goodwill. Although a fight with Grindelwald is inevitable. However, it is better not to fight to the death. He doesn't want to, and I believe Grindelwald doesn't want to either. After all, the Goblin King and Dumbledore are watching covetously. On his side, there is also a Lockhart and another Voldemort. Therefore, he had to save Rosier's life, and even the lives of a group of professors at Durmstrang. This is to give the two sides an excuse to ease the relationship. Looking at Rosier in front of him, Grindelwald carefully sensed the other party's state. Soon, he exhaled lightly. Fortunately, there was no big problem. It's just that the magic riot engraved in the body was forcibly interrupted, and coupled with excessive blood loss, the body fell into weakness. He patted Rosier's shoulder gently, as if to comfort her, that she was safe. At this moment, Rosier tried her best to open her eyes, looking at the familiar face, and a smile appeared on her face. Then, as if she had thought of something, she tried to use all her strength, but the sound she made was still as soft as a mosquito. Be careful. I'm the bait. The voice was very small, but as soon as the words came out, Grindelwald felt a creepy feeling surge into his heart. The next moment, zizzy, zizzy, zizzy. Deep purple smoke spread rapidly from Rosier's body. In the blink of an eye, it had enveloped Grindelwald and the saints behind him. The saints in front of him didn't have time to react, and their skin had already touched the purple smoke. Ah, ah. Painful wails and desperate cries rang out one after another. It seemed to illustrate the power of this black magic. Tom was stunned when he saw this scene. Then he turned around suddenly and stared at Voldemort not far away. Seeing the other party holding up his wand high, with a malicious and ferocious smile on his face. After a quick glance at Grindelwald, who was shrouded in deep purple smoke, he seemed to sense the other party's angry and murderous eyes. At this moment, Tom thought to himself that it was not good. It was over. The plan was out of control. Everything was messed up. Chapter 522 The Battle of the Three Dark Lords, 2 in 1. Originally, I thought it would end peacefully. At most, I would just fight a battle and seek peace through struggle. But now, it really has to be a life or death battle. A confidant died in front of me, and many elite saints died. In such a situation, it is impossible to retreat. It is impossible to end without enough blood and lives. Thoughts quickly emerged in Tom's mind. Without any hesitation, the wand on his waist was pulled back by his right hand at lightning speed. Apparition. The wand was raised, black light flashed, and Tom appeared on the other side of the battlefield in an instant. It formed a triangular battlefield with Voldemort and Grindelwald. Grindelwald, I didn't kill your people. Tom opened his mouth and tried to explain. Then don't say so many useless words, Tom. Voldemort looked at Tom and said sarcastically. Then, he said to Grindelwald coldly, Jertler Grindelwald, we have now fallen into the conspiracy of others. We originally had a common enemy and should have been natural allies. But I don't want to see this situation now, and I believe you don't want to see it either. This is a conspiracy, and there is a mastermind behind us. Grindelwald did not react after hearing what Voldemort said, and the silver-white light in his right eye pupil became brighter and brighter. It seemed that, as long as Voldemort listened to what he said, he was looking for the so-called mastermind. But Grindelwald, what did you see? As if he knew what the other party was doing, Voldemort asked, can't you feel anything? Then, without waiting for the other party to reply, Voldemort spoke to himself, and the malice contained in his tone became stronger and stronger. It's normal. Dumbledore was led to America by him. He is the only one who dominates the whole of Britain. Now he has come up with this plan, to intensify the conflict between us, and distract your energy. As the core figure of the whole conspiracy, you, Grindelwald, are the best at spying on fate. He must have a way to deal with it. Just like me. At this point, Voldemort turned his head and said to Tom in another direction, are you talking about the second me? To contain me, puppet. Tom heard this and showed obvious anger on his face. He hated others mentioning the word puppet the most now, because to some extent, he was Lockhart's puppet. At this moment, he was more surprised than angry about Voldemort at this moment. He thought that the other party's brain was almost devoured by black magic, and it should be difficult to guess the truth of everything. In the end, he was worthy of himself. His sensitivity to danger was far beyond that of ordinary people. Gilderoy Lockhart, hearing the information revealed in Voldemort's words, Grindelwald quickly locked on the target that met the requirements. That's right. Voldemort's pale and ferocious face showed a cold, murderous look. It's him who calculated everything. I just feel that things are getting more and more wrong. I was living well in the UK, but now I have to run to Europe. At this point, Voldemort sneered. I feel that the UK now is cleaner than in any other era. After all the pureblood families and dark wizards were taken away by me. Tom, don't you think so? Voldemort sneered again. Only 3 people could hear this conversation clearly. The Death Eaters and Saints on the side could only see that the 3 people's mouths kept moving, as if they were talking, but no sound came out. What do you want to do? Grindelwald suppressed the murderous intent in his heart and asked. Hearing this, Voldemort showed a cruel smile on his face. It's very simple. We cooperate and kill the mastermind behind the scenes. Lockhart is just one person. How can he be the opponent of the 2 of us? When the time comes, we will take revenge and complain. I believe that you don't want us to fight to the death and let a bastard like Lockhart take advantage of it. Tom, who was standing aside, had a complicated look after hearing this. To be honest, he was a little moved after hearing this. But when he thought of the skull and flames on the night of resurrection and the dark red hellfire, that beat slowly like a heart in the depths of his soul. For some reason, a kind of fear arose in his heart, as if he had encountered a natural enemy, and he slowly dispelled the thoughts in his heart. Grindelwald, do you want to join forces with me? Voldemort invited again. Grindelwald did not reply. He was still using his talent to find possible traces behind and verify the authenticity of Voldemort's words. But unfortunately, like a fog, everything was hazy and complicated, and all was covered. In particular, all information about Lockhart could not be found, which made him gradually sink in his heart. It seems that what Voldemort said is true. Seeing that Grindelwald did not give an accurate answer, Voldemort did not show any impatience on his face, because he knew that it would be very difficult to face the enemy this time. The other party did not have many concerns like Dumbledore. helping Tom to resurrect, plotting to rob Gringotts, and killing so many goblins. These things, without a doubt, show that the other party is also a ruthless character. To put it bluntly, he is another generation of Dark Lord. It's just that he disguises better than them, and his strength seems to be better than everyone present. Grindelwald, whether you agree or not. As he said, Voldemort pointed the wand in his hand at Tom. He, the puppet resurrected by Lockhart, must die today. Otherwise, when Lockhart knows, all our actions will be alerted by him. It will be difficult to attack him again. That's right, as long as he swallows Tom's puppet, his strength will rise again. At that time, whether facing Grindelwald or Lockhart, he will have a greater advantage. As soon as the words fell, Avada Kedavra. Without waiting for Grindelwald to reply, Voldemort waved his wand and cast a fierce killing curse on Tom. He left his back in front of Grindelwald, as if he was very confident in him, without any defense at all. And Grindelwald did not attack him. In response, Voldemort, who was fighting fiercely, showed a smile on his face. He knew that Grindelwald must be tempted. He had already made the threat. If he attacked him again at this time, he would be asking for trouble. Dumbledore was originally an enemy of Grindelwald. If he didn't have his help, plus Lockhart, Grindelwald might not be far from death. As for the death of his confidant Veritaserum, in Voldemort's eyes, it was just a more valuable life. Besides, the steps have been found for Grindelwald. As long as he joins hands with himself to kill Tom Riddle, everything will be explained. At that time, cooperate with him to solve Lockhart. Everything will return to the right track. Avada Kedavra. Avada Kedavra. On the battlefield between Tom Riddle and Voldemort, there were no fancy spells. Only pure killing curses. Dark green killing curses with a strong smell of death intertwined and collided with each other. Both sides took the same steps to dodge and counterattack. From time to time, black light flashed, and the apparition was launched continuously to adjust their positions. The sand and stones on the ground burst, and the stone fragments splashed like bullets. The pits left behind also had a strong smell of corrosive death. It seemed that, if ordinary people touched them slightly, their hands would probably rot. On the battlefield, the two sides of the battle could not be seen clearly. It seemed that there were black shadows flashing every second, and with them, there were a lot of dark green killing curses. The Death Eaters and Saints on the side saw such a fierce battle. They secretly smacked their lips and slowly retreated to the back in tacit understanding, fearing that innocent people would be hurt. After all, this kind of intense battlefield, and all of them were deadly killing curses. If they even touched slightly, they would probably die. The Death Eaters were somewhat puzzled. Why didn't they fight against Grindelwald, but two masters? The Saints were somewhat gloating. The enemy's civil war was simply too wonderful. Grindelwald stood on the edge, watching this life and death battle with cold eyes, as if he was thinking, and hesitating. At this moment, Tom waved his wand vigorously, and while releasing the spell, he was vaguely anxious in his heart. He was not worried about Voldemort who was fighting against him. He was worried about Grindelwald who was standing aside, and didn't know when he would make a move. He could deal with one person. Two wizards of the same level, one of whom was the most familiar with his existence. It was difficult for him to ensure that he would be able to escape and survive. When he put part of his mind on being vigilant against Grindelwald, slowly, his strategy of fighting with Voldemort was at a disadvantage. And Voldemort was even more excited when he saw this. Whether Grindelwald made a move or not, he just had to stand here, break the situation today. As long as he swallowed Tom Riddle, and swallowed another self. If his strength was improved again, everything would be changed. As for what if Grindelwald chooses to attack him, do you think that what he said just now was in vain? If the other party is really stupid and wants to attack him, then he can only admit defeat. In this game today, he has already gambled his life. What's wrong with risk? You know, the bigger the wind and waves, the more expensive the fish. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The cold wind whistled bitterly, and snowflakes were floating all over the sky. However, in front of the huge magic academy of Durmstrang, the fluttering white snowflakes seemed to be dyed dark green by the flying killing curses. When the dark green snowflakes fluttered in the wind, the Death Eaters and Saints standing on both sides subconsciously avoided it. It was really terrifying. Both sides had no other magic, only the deadly mission curse. If they touched each other, they would die. And in less than 10 minutes, they couldn't count the number of times they cast the killing curse. It seemed that a large number of killing curses were cast like rain every second. His mind was distracted, and he was at a disadvantage. Tom Riddle felt something was wrong. Voldemort on the other side was getting more and more excited, and the killing curse in his hand became more fierce, not taking the magic power in his body seriously at all. Suddenly, whoosh, the cold wind was whistling, but strangely, a burning sensation came quietly. It seemed to want to burn people's souls to ashes. Tom Riddle's face changed. In his eyes, a blue fire joined the battlefield, and turned into a blue phoenix rushing towards him. Grindelwald joined the battlefield. His target was himself. A high-risk situation of 2 against 1 was formed. But, Black Mist Incarnation. After another apparition, Tom did not cast the killing curse, but cast another spell that he was good at, the Incarnation of Black Mist. Whoosh, whoosh. With the help of the whistling cold wind, he quickly flew away. He dared not use the long-distance apparition, because it required preparation time. Even if the time was short, it would still be a huge flaw in the eyes of a wizard of the same level like Voldemort. He could only use this spell to cover up and escape from the battlefield. When Voldemort saw Grindelwald waving Fiend Fighter join the battlefield, his face lit up. When he saw this blue phoenix shooting at Tom, he was so happy. However, when he saw Tom using his specialty Black Mist to try to escape from the battlefield, he snorted coldly. Without hesitation, he jumped up, and his body turned into black mist. He chased after the other party. We are all the same person. Who is afraid of whom? What's more, you are a puppet resurrected by Lockhart. In fact, I'm the real one. Grindelwald did not move when he saw this, but the blue phoenix transformed by Fiendfire also waved its wings and chased after the black mist. In any case, in this battle, one of the 2 Voldemorts must die, and the worst result is that the 2 sides will split. For his current situation, it is still beneficial. As for Lockhart, the mastermind behind the scenes, although he had some faith in his heart, he did not have enough information to verify it at his level, so he did not dare to believe it completely, because his decision involved too many people. If it was really Lockhart, next, the situation would be chaotic again. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 2 black objects incarnated by Voldemort and Tom so intertwined with each other, becoming larger and larger, and rolling like dark clouds. The whole sky began to dim for a while. The huge black fog kept rolling, as if it was in a fierce battle. And when the blue Fiendfire poured into it and burned the black fog, in an instant, the huge black fog seemed to be hurt and quickly turned into 2 balls. It fell to the ground and turned into a human form. At this moment, Tom, Voldemort, and Grindelwald stood in a triangle again. Grindelwald still maintained an indifferent expression, and the blue Fiendfire poured out from his feet, turning into a huge blue flame circle, which quickly enveloped the entire battlefield. At the same time, it also isolated the Death Eaters and Saints on the side. Tom and Voldemort looked a little embarrassed. Their wizard robes seemed to be torn by the Fiendfire. Compared with Tom's gloomy face, Voldemort was delighted. Grindelwald joined the battlefield, and today's situation was stable. Tom's face became gloomy. Voldemort was another self, and the 2 knew each other very well. The way of attack, the idea of escape, and even the spells could be guessed clearly. With such an existence, plus Grindelwald, a strong breath of death has filled Tom's heart. He was a little hesitant. There is a chance to turn defeat into victory, but the price is really great. Roar. The blue phoenix rolled over and turned into a tiger. After a loud roar, it ran towards Tom. The tiger opened its huge mouth, and its sharp fangs were fully exposed, and it pounced on Tom. At the same time, Voldemort on the other side waved his wand one after another. The dark green killing curse shot towards Tom like an arrow. It seemed that at this moment, under the joint attack of Voldemort and Grindelwald, Tom's life was hanging by a thread. At the same time, he seemed to feel that the next step would directly determine his life or death. Tom's eyes flashed with ruthlessness, and his mental power touched a certain power deep in his soul. The next moment, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the blink of an eye, the dark red hellfire quickly filled Tom's entire body. A flaming skeleton wrapped in hellfire appeared in the middle of the battlefield. Then boom. The tiger transformed by the blue fierce fire and the killing curse like a rain of arrows collided with the flaming skeleton that Tom transformed into. Chapter 523 Dark Lord, Sinner, let me judge your sins. Boom. The blue fierce fire tiger opened its bloody mouth and pounced. A large number of dark green killing curses shot at Tom like a rain of arrows. With a loud rumble, blue and green lights intertwined, chaotic energy, terrifying pressure, and the breath of death mixed with dust all over the sky, spreading all around. At the scene, grey dust spread all around, and the white snow gradually fell. The saints and Death Eaters stared at the dark devil who was caught by both sides in the center of the battlefield. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The cold wind whistled, and the dust was slowly blown away with the cold wind. What came into view was a hell skeleton wrapped in dark red flames. In the skeleton's hand, there was a magic wand wrapped in hellfire, and sparks kept falling to the ground with the magic wand. The white snowflakes falling from the sky had not even approached a meter away, and they had already decomposed into water and mist. It seemed to illustrate the heat of hellfire. The Dark Lord Grindelwald's eyelids twitched involuntarily as he stared at the flaming skeleton in front of him. He seemed to sense some bad emotions. Whoosh! Without hesitation or words, he raised his wand swiftly. The blue fiend fly turned into a flying dragon and pounced on the hell skeleton Tom Riddle. Voldemort on the side did not take action. For some reason, he could not help but feel fear in his heart. He could not control it, as if he had encountered a natural enemy. So, he watched Grindelwald's test with cold eyes. Roar. With a dragon roar, the dark blue fiend-fi dragon flapped its wings, raised its dragon claws, and slapped the hell skeleton Tom. Crack. 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 Tom shook his head left and right, opened his wand in his left hand, and floated behind him automatically. Then, he raised his white bones wrapped in flames, and grabbed the fiend-fi dragon that was rushing towards him. Boom. A scene that shocked everyone present happened. The huge Litho dragon was actually firmly grasped by the skeleton's arms. The hell skeleton that Tom transformed into was even more motionless, as if the dragon in front of him was just a little chicken. The next moment, zzz, 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 the hell skeleton seemed to take a deep breath, and then, the blue Litho was uncontrollably transformed into two blue flame lines. Then, like eating noodles, Tom swallowed it mouthful by mouthful. The dragon's body became smaller and smaller, and the dark blue Litho became dimmer. In less than 10 seconds, the originally huge Litho dragon was completely swallowed up. Caca. 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 When the hellfire sucked the Litho, it was as if he had drunk a glass of delicious wine. Tom couldn't help smacking his lips and shaking his neck left and right, as if he was a little happy. To be precise, Tom was enjoying the huge power contained in this body at this moment. Power. Powerful power. This power is so powerful that it is really addictive. Tom Riddle stared at the skeletal hand wrapped in flames, shaking it slightly, clenching it slightly, and then stretching it out. Feeling the powerful feedback brought by each beat of his own hellfire, Tom couldn't help but indulge in it. He even forgot the anger he had when he was forced to transform. Yes, he was full of rejection and anger about using the hellfire to transform. Because he knew very well that when he began to use the hellfire, he would be deeply controlled by Lockhart again. He had originally studied how to break away from the magic contract and had achieved certain results. It can be said that he was in sight of breaking away. But now, being attacked by Voldemort and Grindelwald, he had to use the hellfire to save his life. It can be said that the previous research was basically wasted. Avada Kedavra. While Tom was obsessed with studying his own changes, Voldemort saw that Grindelwald's attack was ineffective and cast his best killing curse again. But bang! A large area of dark green flashed like a star, and the killing curse directly hit the flaming skull. There were several bangs, and at the same time, the dark red hellfire seemed to be stimulated and suddenly swept around, drowning and engulfing the crazy flashing green light. Crack, crack, crack. With a few subtle and familiar crackling sounds, the flaming skeleton that Tom turned into turned around, and the white bone skull stared at Voldemort opposite. The hellfire burning on the back, and the dense and slightly blackened black marks seemed to indicate that the power of the killing curse just now seemed not worth mentioning. Your soul exudes an alluring fragrance. The voice was slightly hoarse, but with the hellfire, it was filled with death pressure that ordinary people did not have. Crack, crack, crack. Without hesitation, with the sound of bones rubbing against each other, the flaming skeleton that Tom turned into ran towards Voldemort. Behind him were magic wands wrapped in flames, floating behind him. Looking at the flaming skeleton running wildly, Voldemort's eyes twitched. The opponent's appearance was indeed somewhat horrifying. Compared with his current image, it was uglier, more ferocious, and more evil. A skeleton with flames wrapped around its body was running towards him. One could imagine how creepy such a scene was. However, feeling the flames that kept jumping and wrapping around the opponent, and the constant breath of fear of death, Voldemort's nerves had already been tense. Apparition. The black light flickered, but Voldemort's figure only swayed slightly, and his position did not change at all. The hellfire had already disturbed the nearby space. Seeing the flaming skeleton getting closer and closer, and even being able to feel the scorching heat, Voldemort did not panic. He had already felt the abnormal fluctuations in space. Then, he waved the wand in his hand quickly, a graceful arc. Whoosh! The dark green flame suddenly rose, blinked, and disappeared in an instant. A Death Eater in a black robe appeared where Voldemort was, and Voldemort's figure quietly appeared where the Death Eater was originally. Space replacement. The apparition just now was just a test of the change in space. To what extent? After knowing the result, he could come up with the next battle strategy. When the black-robed Death Eater suddenly discovered the change in his environment, he looked panicked. When he saw the flaming skeleton rushing towards him, and felt a huge breath of death that his master had just endured, his legs softened instantly. His body was trembling. If it weren't for the remaining desire to survive supporting him, he would have collapsed to the ground long ago. Powdered into pieces. Although his voice was trembling because of fear, he still used all his magic power to cast this spell that he was most familiar with. The red light flashed, and the red flame-colored spell shot towards the flaming skeleton. Puff! The flaming skeleton that Tom transformed into grabbed forward and crushed the spell in front of him. It was like grabbing a small flame that had just been ignited, easy and comfortable. Then, before the Death Eater could react, the flaming skeleton grabbed the Death Eater's neck with his left hand and lifted it high. Then, a hoarse voice with a breath of death sounded. "Sinner, look into my eyes and let me judge your sins." Chapter 524, Hell Skeleton Mage Form. "Let me judge your sins." Voldemort stood aside, looking at this skeleton wrapped in hellfire, saying these words in a hoarse voice. He couldn't help but feel inexplicably absurd. If a white wizard or a righteous hero said this, there would be no problem. But you are the Dark Lord who killed many lives, and now you look like an evil skeleton. Saying such words, with such a face. Especially the word sinner. If people don't know, they would think this is a righteous judge or white wizard. But everyone in the world knows that in terms of the degree of sin, you, the Dark Lord, are definitely one of the best, ranking at the top. The contrast is too great. However, when the Death Eater caught by the Hell Skeleton kept making struggling hoarse sounds, his hands kept slapping in the air, and his feet kept tiptoeing, trying to touch the ground and breathe a breath of air. But not long after, under the gaze of Voldemort, Grindelwald and all other wizards, the eyes of the flaming skull that Tom transformed into were blazing with fire. At the same time, the hellfire poured into the eyes of the Death Eater and into his head. It seemed to be searching for and identifying some information. In the blink of an eye, dark red hellfire came out of the Death Eater's mouth, nose, and eyes. Ho. Sinner, you are guilty. The Death Eater still made a desperate sound of struggling, and the flaming skull made a direct judgment, based on the picture that emerged in his mind. The next moment, the hellfire rushed into the Death Eater's body frantically. Then, the hellfire carried a transparent soul, left the body, and poured into the skull's mouth. Devour the soul. An idea emerged in Voldemort's mind. Originally, the serious face became even colder, and even vaguely, there was a hint of fear. His immortality was achieved by Horcruxes, and the power attributes that the other party showed now were basically all aimed at the soul. In addition, all his previous killing curses were completely ineffective. To put it bluntly, this is his natural enemy. Especially after he was resurrected, his soul itself was one of his weaknesses. At this moment, he felt a little regretful in his heart for turning against Tom. Boom. When Grindelwald saw the forbidden behavior of the flame skeleton devouring the soul, his heart jumped, and without hesitation, he quickly waved his wand. In a flash, dark clouds gathered in the sky, and thunder and lightning fell like raindrops on the flame skeleton. Then there were continuous roars, and thunder and lightning hit the hell skeleton wrapped in flames. In any case, thunder can always cause greater damage to dark creatures. Grindelwald thought so. Voldemort on the side was the same, and had the same opinion. After all, the other party's skeleton appearance was as dark as it could be, and as evil as it could be. However, when the thunder slowly died down, the flame skeleton turned, and looked at Grindelwald opposite. A wisp of black marks appeared on his body, as if to indicate that the previous attack still could not cause significant damage. Grindelwald's provocation stimulated the flaming skeleton, and the hellfire wrapped around its body suddenly swept in all directions. Originally, the ones floating behind it, wrapped in hellfire, began to rapidly separate. 2, 4, 8. Finally, there were 32 ones in total. The 32 ones with the same appearance and wrapped in flames quickly turned into 2 circles and rotated slowly. They corresponded to Voldemort and Grindelwald respectively. The huge energy fluctuations quickly spread to the surroundings, making many wizards feel a dangerous breath of death in their hearts. At this time, Grindelwald and Voldemort saw the flaming skeleton stretch out his arms. The circles formed by the 32 ones corresponded to the 2 of them respectively. The next moment, boom. These 32 ones shot out different spells almost at the same time. Bright red disarmament spells, dark black breaking spells, and even dark green killing spells. A large number of spells passed through the entire battlefield like a rain of arrows. A loud roar spread throughout the battlefield. Voldemort and Grindelwald's faces changed, and they waved their wands. One after another, golden armor spells and various defensive spells were cast in succession, trying to block this sea of spells. Bang, bang, bang. A spell hit the golden shield transformed by the armor spell, but did not penetrate it. But with the second and third spells hitting quickly in succession, in the blink of an eye, the golden shield was broken. Then, the first and second defenses were broken one after another. The Death Eaters and Saints around were particularly worried. However, for the 2 at this moment, their expressions just became serious. Watching the spells being offset one by one, but new spells were shot at them. Grindelwald's right pupil turned silver white in an instant. The nearby land was also dyed silver white in the blink of an eye. The realm of destiny. The majestic power of destiny quickly gathered, and everything around was glowing with silver white light. However, vaguely, a black mark like a dark cloud appeared above the realm of destiny. As Grindelwald stared at the flaming skeleton transformed by Tom, he pressed down heavily with a magic wand in his hand. The majestic power of destiny turned into a silver white blade and rushed to the top of the hell skeleton, as if cutting the other party's destiny. At the same time, a large amount of doom power also began to flow into the body of the hell skeleton. It seemed that both sides were ready to kill at one stroke. Seeing this, Voldemort on the side hurriedly waved his magic wand and cast his own best in all aspects, which was also the most powerful dark and curse spell. He wanted to take advantage of the other party's most unlucky moment and take it down with one blow. However, when the power of destiny tried to shatter Tom's destiny, he wanted to make him die in a sense. However, what shocked Grindelwald was that the other party seemed to be neither alive nor dead in his perception of destiny. It seemed that there was no destiny, or it was completely obscured. The power of destiny and the power of doom returned in vain. Voldemort's dark spells were also burned, crushed, and swallowed by the hellfire. It seemed that at this moment, the 2 of them had no way to deal with this flaming skeleton. Voldemort, like Grindelwald, also sensed the weird state of the hell skeleton at the moment. He couldn't help but be shocked. The other party's state of being neither alive nor dead was too weird. To a certain extent, the other party was almost immune to all attacks. No wonder the killing curse had no effect, because the other party seemed to have no life at all. It was simply incredible, and beyond their cognition. Then, watching the flaming skeleton control the 32 magic wands floating in the air again, it seemed to be preparing for the next round of spell attacks. Grindelwald and Voldemort looked at each other, as if they had a telepathic connection, and shouted at the same time. Death Eaters, Saints, retreat. Chapter 525, Marvel Hellfire and Black Magic Collision. Retreat. Grindelwald and Voldemort ordered at the same time. Saints and Death Eaters looked at each other. Soon, some dark wizards among the Death Eaters took out magic brooms from the space extension bag and flew away. It's not that they can't apparate, but the surrounding space has long been locked by the Hellfire. It's difficult for Voldemort to leave directly by apparate, and he can only move in a short distance through sacrifice. The actions of the dark wizard seemed to have opened a certain signal. A large number of saints also took out magic brooms and flew away to escape from this battlefield. Some Death Eaters did the same. To be honest, they saw their companions being sucked by the flame-wrapped skeleton. That was really scary. This is the real peace after death. Even the soul is swallowed. There is no possibility of resurrection. Even ghosts can't be made. How miserable it is. Hearing the orders of Voldemort and Grindelwald, the impatient dark wizards among the Saints and Death Eaters left directly. But what is amazing is that some Death Eaters still stay where they are. They don't move at all, as if they are waiting for something. Most of these people are pure blood nobles, and only a few are dark wizards. When Voldemort saw this scene, his face was as cold as ice, and he snorted coldly. How could he not know now? These Death Eaters may have changed their hearts, and would rather submit to this puppet of Lockhart than to him. But he didn't have time to punish these traitors, because Tom, who was wrapped in hellfire, had already attacked him. When Tom heard the retreat order from Grindelwald and Voldemort, he didn't react at all. To be precise, the only reaction was to continue to attack the two. These two bastards forced him to use the power of hellfire to be further tied up by Lockhart. It is really difficult to calm the anger in his heart if he doesn't vent it. After transforming into a hell skeleton, Tom's mind automatically emerged with certain combat experience. With his arm raised high, the hellfire kept rolling, and a long iron chain made of pure hellfire naturally emerged from his hand. He swung it vigorously, and the iron chain began to spin rapidly with his arm as the center. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The hell chain spun with a whoosh, and the sparks emitted by the hellfire also splashed everywhere. The huge power rose again, and the hell skull stared at Voldemort with eyes full of hellfire. The hell chain wearing in his hand took off with a bang, rushing towards Voldemort very spiritually. At the same time, the 32 hellfire wands behind him cast various spells on Grindelwald, trying to attack and hinder him. Transformed quickly. Looking at the hellfire chain flying towards him, full of dangerous breath. Feeling that the space was further locked, Voldemort did not hesitate, waving his wand, and while retreating backwards, he cast a large number of transformation spells. Rumble. With a rumbling sound, the earth and stone ground deformed, and earth and stone giants 2 people tall quickly formed, and then rushed towards the iron chain and the hell puppet. Boom. A earth and stone giant waved his right arm, which was earthy yellow, and mixed with white snow, and grabbed the iron chain full of hellfire. But with a thump, the iron chain directly smashed the earth and stone giant's right arm into pieces. Then it quickly rushed towards Voldemort's position. As a spiritual hell chain, its goal was very clear. Roar. The earth and stone giant whose right arm was shattered roared angrily, and then his left hand grabbed the flying chain again. At the same time, other earth and stone giants along the way also waved their arms, and even used their bodies to grab and block the chains full of hellfire. But, whoosh, 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 the hellfire wrapped around the caught hell chain suddenly swept around, wrapped the earth and stone giants along the way one by one, and burned them to ashes in the blink of an eye. It took only 2 or 3 seconds, and all the earth and stone giants were wiped out. But this period of time still allowed Voldemort to cast various protective spells, shielding spells, and set up confusing spell traps. In a blink of an eye, a large number of Voldemort's figures quietly emerged on the snow-white ground, with the same energy fluctuations. It was hard to tell which one was real, and which one was fake. Their movements were almost identical, with their wands raised high, and pointed at the sky, and the violent energy fluctuations disturbed the surroundings. The next moment, boom. A huge black eye suddenly appeared in the sky. The eye blinked slowly, emitting a huge breath of darkness, death, and killing. Then, a huge black energy beam fell from the sky and hit the Hell Skull on the ground directly. Eye of Death. Voldemort's own spells created recently. Part of the idea came from the joint casting of Lockhart's students. Of course, more importantly, it was a trump card against his future enemies. Now it is really used. After seeing this, the skeleton Tom turned into immediately jumped up and dodged. The huge Eye of Death in the sky continued to blink slowly, and the black death light column full of darkness and killing moved quickly, chasing the Hell Skull that was dodging on the ground. For a moment, dark and corroded roads left by the death light column attack continued to emerge on the ground. Looking from above, the originally bumpy snowy ground appeared with intricate black lines. And inside or on one side of these black lines, dark red lines cast by the fire of hell also quietly emerged. It seemed to be preparing something. The fire of hell, never extinguished, burns all evil, darkness, and sin. The Hell Skull dodged the black death light column descending from the sky and was also preparing to counterattack. Grindelwald on the side watched this scene coldly. He had just resisted the spell released by the Hell Skull, and then he did not move. After all, the current situation is very clear. The enemy that this skeleton with flames wrapped around his body is not himself, but Voldemort. Naturally, he was too lazy to intervene. After all, Voldemort had killed one of his confidants. Although the two sides had united for some reasons, he had no intention of saving Voldemort. The main purpose of staying here now was to see the true strength of the Hell Skull. After understanding a little, it would be convenient for the layout later. As for whether Lockhart was involved, he was not sure, but everything had to be prepared. Boom. At some point, the black lines left by the death light column on the originally white ground had turned into a road full of hellfire. It seemed that they had made preparations, or locked the weakness of the huge death eye above. The 32 ones behind Tom quickly floated above his head. This time, the hellfire condensed again, and the 32 hellfire ones were divided into 64 again. Above Tom's head, a huge circular red flame pattern was formed, aiming at the huge eye in the sky. Boom. 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 At the moment of formation, the lines covered with hellfire on the ground quickly turned into hell chains and soared into the air, flying towards the huge Eye of Death in midair, wrapping it, locking it, and binding it. In a flash, the Eye of Death had no time to move and escape. It was already bound by a large number of hell chains and locked in midair, motionless. At the same time, the red flame pattern composed of 64 magic wands above Voldemort's head kept flashing red light. The huge energy fluctuations made the remaining pure blood wizards in Grindelwald look sideways. Boom. With a loud bang, a huge dark red light column formed by the hell flames directly hit the locked Eye of Death. In an instant, the location of the black Eye of Death was like a nuclear explosion. Above the blue sky, an extremely conspicuous mushroom cloud rose. As if feeling the power of this spell, Grindelwald turned around and turned into a blue flame and flew backwards. The situation was roughly understood, and he was not interested in accompanying Voldemort to resist this difficult opponent. And Voldemort, who was in the distance, saw that his trump card was directly blown up. His face instantly turned very ugly, but he did not hesitate. Seeing Grindelwald leave, he immediately turned into black mist and retreated. The hell puppet that Tom transformed into did not chase, but just watched the two figures, one black and one blue, leaving. Soon, the hellfire quickly extinguished. Tom's handsome and elegant figure reappeared. Then, he slowly walked towards the remaining pure blood wizards and dark wizards behind him. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.